I want to thank you for coming. Since the time of Christ, the church has always been under attack. It's been attacked sometimes by soldiers and armies, other times by heresy, other times by schemes. We are convinced that our enemy is attacking the church through the family, through the breaking down of family values, and the confusion over biblical values. One of the things that we're seeing attacking our children are sexual issues. It used to be when some of us came up, we were boy, girl, or that was pretty much it. End of discussion. Not so now. And it has our children confused. It has them questioning. It has parents baffled. How do I deal with these questions? And what should be our response to a culture that sees us as hateful? And hopefully Corey is going to answer some of our questions today and help parents and grandparents with their children. Corey is a professor at Corbin University in Salem, Oregon. He's also mine and Ginger's son-in-law and the father of three of our red-headed grandchildren. And we're just excited he's going to be here. And I want to turn the floor over to him and let him just lead you as he feels like he needs to.
Let's start with a word of prayer. Dear God, I just pray that today, this next few hours, we can really kind of lay aside some of the other stuff that's stressing us out, kind of worrying us, and really focus on another area that's really an area of stress and worry and concern, and just kind of rest there, ask questions, but seek you, Lord. I pray for our children. I pray for our grandchildren. I pray for also those that we're ministering to and in relationship with, that we can be a light, that we can be a place of hope and encouragement, and not a place of just criticism and even judgment. That's not our place, Lord. May we lead well, and may this time and conversation go well. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So, imagine your son coming home from youth retreat. He's 13, and he says, I've got a girlfriend. And you're like, should have talked about that. It happens a lot. But imagine a lot of our kids, and I'm seeing this a lot, is a kid comes home from school, comes home from some other event, and is saying, I don't know who I am anymore. I think I'm bisexual. Or I think I'm a biologically a boy, but I think I'm a girl. And they're asking questions that for most of us, just mind blown. We're done. We don't know where to go, we don't know where to turn. And so that's kind of where we're going to start, is we're going to spend some time looking at what do we do with these questions. We're going to talk through some of the stuff that I have in my book that was my journey, kind of how to answer these questions even for my own kids, but also all these kids I live ministering to as a college professor. I've got, 16 years of data on college students. They take my human sexuality class. It's been neat to watch the trends of what they're stressed about, what they're worrying about, where they come from, what they wish would have happened, and what do we do with this. So kind of bringing all that. And then years of being a professional counselor. How do we help this young lady who doesn't understand that sending naked pictures of herself is probably not a good idea? Well, but he asked, so why wouldn't I? And we live in a culture that's so focused on body and image and the physical and the sexual. What do we do with that? If you think of where we are at our age, this gamut of ages and extreme even, we don't even know what to do with it ourselves. So how do we actually have this conversation with our kids? So that's kind of where we're going to spend some time. As we even wrestled, my wife and I, with the title of this book, it was fun to come up with this title. I can't say that. This is where we're at. Except if you ask my kids, they're like, please stop, Dad. We probably talk about porn every day in our house. Part of it's creating a culture of a family that's going to say, here's the content, and here's the ideas, and it scares me to say this, but you have to be the steward. I've got to prepare you. The protection side, sometimes we do well. The preparing, I think it's getting worse. The thing is, though, if I think back to even my own childhood, there was a lot of protection, but not necessarily preparation either. If you think of our stories, that's probably the case too. There was some protection, but not necessarily the preparation, especially with the questions being asked today. This is the subtitle even, was going beyond the talk, equipping your children to make choices about sexuality and gender from a biblical sexual ethic. So, why the role of biblical sexual ethic? To me, that was the most important piece. And then I started realizing as I talked to families, I don't meet families that say, you know what, I want my kids to have a biblical sexual ethic. I think they want it, but I don't see families actually saying that's their primary goal, if you will. So I've actually been wrestling with, so what is it that parents actually want for their kids? Besides getting them out of the house, launching them, getting rid of them, and how to get to this. And so that's actually been my current journey, is trying to figure out, so what is that message and that goal for us as parents and grandparents, as many of us are even raising our grandchildren, how to love them and help them launch well. And Bar and I did a study, and ironically, when he released this study, his daughter was in rehab. And so he had a hard time releasing this, because he's like, how can I say anything about this when my daughter's a mess? I failed. And he did. He was a very absent dad in some ways through all his research, and he missed some things. But also one of the things that I have found as a therapist is, show me a parent that didn't. 100% of us fail. 100% of us. And so one of the things I even teach in my trauma therapy class is exactly that, is that when you see that you are a failure there, that you make mistakes, it's funny how you can now have grace. But if you don't, the arrogance, the things you miss even more so. And I call them, this is experiment number 1, we have 3. We have experiments. Each of you are an experiment. Your parents did the best they could. Remember one young lady who, her parents split, and her mom had a guy after guy after guy in the house. Pornography everywhere all the time. And as we're talking through who she was, it was, your mom had you. What if that's the biggest blessing that she could have ever had done, is to keep you, to have you? And she started, it was funny, just that one little piece, all of a sudden she's like, yeah. And she was actually, and the weird thing to say, thankful for her mom, even though her mom was very abusive and a drug addict and everything else messed up. Yes, sometimes it's such a subtle shift that can change everything. That's part of why I love counseling. Teaching, I love the teaching part because I get to do some of this stuff. I never realized, I started doing these seminars back, 19 years ago? Never realizing one day I'd be a professor. And then realizing as a professor now, you know what, it's different here in this kind of setting. Because as my wife and I were talking the last few days, even on our road trip here, I would usually have about 400 slides, and we were just going to truck through stuff, content. I'm a professor, let's teach. Not necessarily what is the most helpful. There's a place for that. And it's different when you're going through a 16-week journey through something. Today we have a few hours, and where I want us to actually spend some time is, where are you at? And I know that's kind of risky, but it's like, some of you have questions and have things that are going on with your own kids or those that you know, and I want us to go there. So we're going to have some spots where we're going to really dig into what does that look like for you. So be thinking about that, maybe jotting a few of those down. What are some of those questions that you have? Because this weighs heavy. And as I was talking to someone yesterday here, and they're like, I tried to read your book, but it's like, I don't want to know some of this stuff. Like, yes, exactly. None of us want to go here. I hate having to go into another conversation after another of a rape victim. But I love the hope that comes from after those conversations, where they can go, who they can become. My wife this morning showed me an article, Netherlands, the assisted suicide rate. And we live in Oregon, which is also another one of those assisted suicide. You can move there and kill yourself. It's actually on the increase, but it's also, the suicide rates are on the increase too, because it's like this permission to in my life if I want to. And so the area that's happening is those that have been through trauma, sexual abuse, or other rough things. I want out. Yeah. I know I've spent too many years of my adult life wanting out because of my physical health. I mean, thankful that obviously I didn't, but also that there wasn't that way out. That's a choice. It's hard. Here's what the sex ed talk looks like usually, though. I think it's time we had to talk about sex. It's not even all that humorous in the sense that sometimes we're like, I mean, my mom, remember when we got a VCR, she just refused to learn how to use it. It's like an answering machine, and then each of the things was like, nope, not going to learn this. It's like, this is an area where we must learn. We must understand what certain apps are on phones, and how with technology it's easy to hide stuff. I was dealing recently with a client who was in their 60s who had an affair, and he, this old guy with an app on his phone, had all his texts hidden over here with this woman. Not a tech savvy person either, but this other person set it up for him, and hey, here's how we can communicate in secret. Like, there's stuff like that we need to be aware of. But then in the end, as we raise those children, it's yours to steward. Like, this becomes your responsibility, which is really hard and absolutely terrifying for any of us. Or this is how sex ed also goes. Sperm is released, move on to the egg. Stop laughing at the word penis! And then we'll just show you pictures of STDs. That's sex ed. And I didn't bring it with me today, but if you look at the book that's recommended for public schools right now, and as I've taught over the years, I've actually met very few that have been to those schools where they use this book. And it teaches about how to have anal sex, how to masturbate. Same-sex marriage and relationships are all normal. Everything is normal. It's normalizing everything. My new human sexuality textbook from last year that I use in my classes added a section last year. And it was married couples. You need to try this new thing. It's called anal sex. It'll spice up your sex life. It's like, why would they do that? Well, because there's something bigger going on. We have to make everything okay. Which needs to make us as Christians kind of step back and go, wait a minute here. What if we've bought into a whole bunch of things that are actually really outside of God's design and God's even purpose? What if the data that we use to decide what is okay and what isn't okay is actually very much guided by the world, not us or any kind of biblical sexual ethic? What if we're not very different than everyone else? Which is a scary place to be. Text, I just had sex ed in school today. Dad, you lied to me. You told me I have sex before my 16th birthday, my boyfriend will die. Oh, you will, sweetheart. You will. It's scary, the whole idea of the fact is that we're creating these little beings that actually can affect someone else's life in a great way. Teen pregnancy, which, by the way, tends to have two people who are involved there. It's amazing how if we're not careful, we put the load of that on her. There's very little that happens for him. If you think of STDs anyway, that's another big issue. Who is it that the biggest gun is to their head? It's for women. More men than not can walk away from that encounter kind of, Many women can't because of the impact of our design. And that's where the way men and women are created is critical. We're doing such a good job of kind of melding these together. No, if we don't learn to celebrate the differences of masculinity and femininity, I think we fail. It degrades everything. And I think we're seeing that in our culture. So that's going to be important. This is how I see, though, we teach and talk about sex. It's almost like a drug. And so we even talk about it in the church in a way that's all bad, but then when you're all of a sudden supposed to flip a switch and you're married and it's supposed to be a good thing, there's not a switch to flip. And so there's a category currently in the research that shows that the area of trauma and abuse in adults is growing up in an overly religious home. It's scary. Think about, okay, so again, my 3 experiments. How do I raise them up in a Christ-centered home that's not an overly religious home? I was. And how did that affect me? How did that affect my development and my understanding of myself and the world? And what does that mean about my faith? And a lot of it's in how you and how we make decisions. Where does this really come down to in terms of the focus is us as parents, us as leaders. If we don't know what we believe, then what are we teaching? Because they're over here watching. But if we really don't know what we believe, they're catching a bunch of pieces. Let's just even think about marriage. If we don't talk specifically about this is marriage, our kids are just watching and gathering data, random pieces of data, and piecing it together themselves. They're just saying, no, this is the beautiful design by God. Here's how we mess it up royally, and here's how it can be redeemed. Like one of the words that comes to my mind is the word attraction. If we're not careful, we get wrapped up into it's all about just whatever or whoever I'm attracted to. It's like, ooh, that's not necessarily good data. Just what I'm attracted to. Because the truth is then take all the secular research that basically says we're not made for monogamy, and I go, true. We're messed up. Your data shows me that the Bible's still true. That we have a bent towards being very selfish, as in I have to choose to live righteous, and then I fail, and choose, and choose. I don't know about you, it puts me back in charge, which is where usually I want to be, right? Control freaks. And I actually have a choice, versus I'm just whoever I feel or whatever whim that I experience. So why is it important, a biblical sexual ethic? The two kind of pieces I want to spend time on is the word gender and the word sexuality. So gender, again, it's another one. It's even a few years ago, I don't think I could have seen that coming, being that big of a struggle. If you look at where the LGBTQ plus community is right now, it's very interesting to see that the LGB are saying, yeah, I'm not sure I want to be associated with T, transgender, because of some of the pushes. And how do we process that? What do we do with that? The head of pediatrics, American Pediatric Association, she said that if you do not do any intervention with a child who has gender dysphoria, and would say they're, especially with the new language now of I'm transgender, if you do nothing, 94% rate of just choosing their gender they are. Yet what are we doing? It's hormones, it's drugs, it's surgeries from a young age. And now we've got shows on Netflix like Raising Koi, and then Jazz, if you've seen her. She's now 17, 18 years old. She's biologically a boy. But looks like this gorgeous young lady. And her parents celebrate that she is so special because she is a girl who has a penis. And then she's wondering why she's having struggles dating. And we're creating a mess. And then how do we handle this carefully, sensitively, in a way that doesn't just make people go, you don't love me? How do you define love? That's a hard one. Because currently in our culture, love is just full-on acceptance of anything I say or do, and whatever I believe. There's even in the academic world, there's this, don't challenge me. This is what I believe, I'm going to stick to it. It's like, well, what is it founded on? Well, that doesn't matter. Or we present multiple ideas, and they're like, no, that offends me. Personally, I go, God, what other button's going to push? As in, we need to wrestle with this stuff as Christians, and this becomes a centerpiece. A biblical sexual ethic. What does the Bible say? And what does even this word ethic mean? Your ethos, your belief system. And so actually what I did in this book, there's the book, also the workbook. The workbook's literally meant for a parent to walk through themselves and write out answers and think through, what do I believe? Because that's actually, to me, where, when I looked at the data from my human sexuality class, the students were saying, I wish my parents had been safe. They were not. When you look at a lot of other research, like from Barna and others, they've actually said, that if you come over here and talk to the parents of those kids, the parents said, but I told them I was safe. I always had an open door policy. Okay, what's the disconnect? Well, the disconnect is you were safe but weren't having conversations. And they didn't see you as safe and you weren't having conversations. Mom and Dad, it's on you. That's hard to stomach sometimes. As in, we don't wait around for them to bring up the fact that this is going on at school. We go there. That movie or that TV show, it's called 13 Reasons Why. Terrifying show. Terrifying show. What I've been telling everyone since it came out, when it came out, the first season, I polled my students 2 weeks after. I said, who's seen it? And over half the rooms they'd already been binge-watched the whole thing. And then as I started talking to families, well, most of their kids have TVs and other devices in their bedroom. They'd already all binge-watched it themselves too, the kids. So now fast forward a couple of years, what we're seeing is the suicide rate is going up from that show. What's the disconnect? It's a lack of conversations. And then people get mad at me when I say, you need to sit down and watch that show with your kids. There's a lot of language. Yes, there's a very violent rape scene in that show. It is all uncalled for. If they're going to watch it without you, yikes. It's a very different story if you can sit there and go, okay, let's process that. You're the leader in that. There's no way on earth I would have done that, personally. Until I start seeing what's going on in our culture and in our kids. Especially if your kid's going to school, any school, public school, private school, whatever else. I mean, because we homeschool, there's not a lot of really weird people in that group too. So it's just whoever they hang around, they're being influenced by questions and conversations and ideas that you need to be that first person. This is a passage that kind of spend a lot of time just thinking about where we're at. It says, teach the older men to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-controlled. Likewise, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live. Then they can train the younger women to love their husbands and children and to be self-controlled and pure. Similarly, encourage the young men to be self-controlled. Live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. I sense a theme in this passage. How do we live self-controlled? Ironically, it's not by doing whatever I think or feel. We were talking at a campsite recently, a gentleman who had retired, and he's like, I don't know what to do with myself. And I think through work, the fact that God made us to actually work, it changes over time, and there's limits to what we can do as we get older, and that's actually not a bad thing if we move with it. One of the things we've seen in marriage is what helps a marriage really live well and thrive is that flexibility as life changes and as life stages come and things happen. If you don't have that flexibility, if you're rigid, there's consequences there. How do you live self-controlled as a man and as a woman? How do you celebrate those differences and how do you pull from the wealth of knowledge and experience and perspective from each? I think is critical. So where do we start? We start with your story. As I've said, it comes down to us. What do I believe? What do I understand about human sexuality, about different issues? And then we need to understand too, we're not alone. What I see in counseling is the same story every time. They're here to see me, and they're as alone as they can get. But why? Well, they didn't have a system around them, a body around them. A body of Christ around them. And we need that group. When we were in Georgia, we had that. When we lived there, we had this group of friends and people in our church, and had a bunch of biker guys that were my buddies that I didn't know I needed before. I learned I really needed good men in my life, and I grabbed onto them, and that was probably the hardest part to leave. Ironically, now in Oregon, it's our Boy Scout troop. It's our dads. And once a month, I know I'm going camping with this group of dads. I look forward to it. But one of the things I tell my kids, our two boys, is when they see me over here talking with one of those other boys, I'm having probably a conversation that they don't want to have with their dad. But I'm also hoping that they'll do the same with one of those other dads. It's creating a system. And when one of those dads has a struggle, it's amazing what will be said around a campfire. And then when I'm struggling, what I'm able to kind of ask them about or talk through, that it creates, we need this. And what is the main thing a client that I see doesn't have? They don't have a community. They might be a part of a church, but they wouldn't say it's their home. They don't fit. They haven't found those people, their people. Really, that's difficult. I don't know what to do with that. And don't go it alone. One of the things that I've created is, so I do counseling and I do kind of life and executive and marriage family life coaching. I do a bunch of other stuff like that. But I was like, the cost of these too is difficult for most people. So what I've been building this past year is a membership site that's going to be focused on a biblical sexual ethic. That is all about how do I help teach and train on this one piece. Oh goodness, what's the evangelist? 50 plus years. Josh McDowell. I think that's his name. Josh McDowell. Last time I heard him speak, it was his 50th year of being in ministry. Apologetics is what he's focused on his whole career. And he said, I've had to change everything I'm doing now. The number one, which Pastor Kenny said at the beginning, the number one thing that's assaulting our families and our culture right now is sexual junk, pornography. And then he went through an hour-long discourse on all the data and statistics of here's what we found in our research. It's scary. And it's way, way, way too accessible. I call these porn portals. Because you just open it, and then what do you do? I've got it open, it's just a few clicks. You hit Safari, and then you type in porn, P-O-R-N. I want to protect young minds, how funny. It goes straight to what? If I type in, I'll go to Google real quick. What's there when you type it in? Anybody know? You don't want to reveal it. It's just text, see? That's all it is. But it's Pornhub, all these other websites, and then next to all says videos and images. That's how close it is. Click on videos, your life's never the same. Click on images, actually, ironically, less so. The videos are the part that scares me the most. Now, for a lot of our kids, not teens even, our kids, the first thing they're seeing is graphic videos. And once you see one, it's a rabbit hole. Are they going to come talk to us? No. Are my kids going to come talk to me? Probably not. Because Satan lives here. This is his territory of shame. He wants that. Well, will they talk to someone? I hope so. That's not humble later. How's that one? It's kind of scary though at how easily that's accessible. And then we're passing them out like candy. Digital minimalist, I forgot his name now, his last name. An author just came out with a book last year saying, and this is a guy who has no media, social media, nothing, but he was like, let's study technology. He said, I believe that by, I think he said 5 years, we will be appalled and shame even the parent that gives their 12 or 13-year-old a cell phone and not have a smartphone. But it's funny because he says that, but where are we at today? Today we're at the point where, it's an entitlement thing. And everyone has them. What do you do with that? As we think through, it's really important. So where do we go with this? Change begins with you, and this is what we have to do. We're in charge of sex ed. Not the school, not the church. It's the parents. Now, California, they just made a law that said that you have to teach all 15 genders to kindergartners.
Oh my Lord.
Which I laugh because Facebook has 70-something now. So aren't they in the same state? They don't talk? Like, they're behind the times, I guess. 15? Really? Is that all? Kindergarten. Now think about where you were at when your kids hit kindergarten. About the conversations you had about sex or sexuality. Probably zero. But yet you're going to send your kids. Think if you live in California and you send your kids to school. If they walk into school and you're going to say, this is what I hear. Oh, no, my kids aren't old enough for me to talk to them about that. I'm like, so they're old enough for them to? They're going to. And you're saying you're going to be silent. Oh, don't do that. Be that one that'll actually talk to a kid what feels like too young in a way that actually says, no, this is stewardship from the beginning. You have to be able to realize what you believe that even at 6, 7, 8 matters. This is the areas that we need to actually spend time diving into. So this is my human sexuality class. So learning basic human sexuality, a theology of sex, theology of marriage. What does even marriage mean? Tim Keller has a book on marriage that he wrote it on marriage, but the meaning of marriage, if you haven't read it, it's a great one, but his church is almost all single adults in New York. And the reason why he wrote it is like saying, these kids aren't marrying, these young adults aren't marrying because we've turned marriage into this terrifying thing. The divorce rate's never been 50%. It's actually much more hopeful than that. So what do we do with that? We have a lot of bad data and bad information that actually we need to clear up. We've made people a lot more scared than they should be. I love this part, the brain in sex and the brain in love. Neuroscience in just the last few years has just been incredibly fun to look at. They do brain scans and they see what lights up and what doesn't. They scan a scan of a typical guy versus a scan of a typical woman at rest. What's the difference? Anyone know? The guy, you have to go check his pulse and see if he's alive. It's like, And the woman's brain is about 90% active. Which my wife and I is kind of opposite of that, but it's complicated. That marriage is actually complicated. The differences in who we are as people is complicated. The brain and the sexual part of who we are, we spent years talking about how men are pigs. You remember when that actually changed data-wise? After World War II, the women left where? They left the home and they went to work. And all of a sudden the affair rate went, sorry, we're all dumb. Men were having more affairs before because of accessibility. And as women left the house and went to work, the accessibility was now there. And now we're all a mess. Once we get to that point, we can go, okay, wait a minute. It's still back to me and my stewardship, my choices. Does my brain lead me towards different directions? Absolutely, yes. Does culture and the community and the family I grew up in? Absolutely, yes. Yet psychologists still debate, is it nature or nurture? It's like, oh my gosh, you still asking that question? It's all. And so what do you do with that? So building your personal ethos, you have to have a plan. Commit to living by your plan. And then leading by example. This is where we put this into action. We're having conversations. We're leading with assertiveness and with confidence. We've got to be able to go there and actually have these conversations, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Gender. So I want to ask you a question about what are the differences between masculinity and femininity? How would you define those or make the distinctions of those two? One's tough and one's not. Okay.
Won't say which one.
Man and woman. Very simple. What?
I was supposed to say one's tough, one's not. Wouldn't say which one.
Yeah, I'll go there later.
Women tend to be more emotional, men more logical. Generally.
Okay, so generally more emotional. Okay, yeah, that's gonna be a fun one in a minute.
If you take it back to pure science, it's the difference of one chromosome.
Okay, so the difference between one chromosome, which we kind of dismiss that when we have
Estrogen, testosterone.
estrogen and testosterone, yeah.
Oh,
The chemical side.
Oh, I can't say that in church, she said.
It's like I said penis earlier. What else? Differences, masculinity and femininity.
One's a protector, one's a nurturer.
Okay, one's a protector, one's a nurturer.
I think maybe One's maybe more macho, one's not.
One's more macho, one's not. That's interesting, okay.
One's typically right all the time, one's not.
One's typically right all the time, one's not. Yes, that's
And I can tell you which one it is.
Because she's right.
right. I love it. Yep. Now, you don't have to answer this, but I want you to think about this. How many of you, again, rhetorical for you to think about, unless you want to answer, but how many of you some of those stereotypes that were even mentioned were actually part of the harm in your own story? Maybe because of these kind of more rigid stereotypes about this is masculine and this is feminine, actually that was a problem for you. That's where we're actually coming into some trouble right now. When we say this is masculine and this is feminine, and we define it really strongly, but we look at the Bible and it doesn't say that. That's a problem. What do we do with that?
You mean kind of like the whole thing, like for your little boy, you get army men and guns and cars, and your little girl gets dolls, and the whole pink and blue thing and stuff.
Yeah, that we do that, and then there's that little girl that's like, "Where's my gun?"
Well, we were raised with this was men's work and this was women's work.
Oh yeah.
So when you even say the word doctor, what's the first gender that pops in your mind?
Man.
Male. And it's neat to see that's not the case anymore. But it's funny that we have those stereotypes. How does that impact you, though, in terms of yourself? Because this is where it starts. It starts with my story first. So in my story, this destroyed me. When you have these stereotypes, and I go, I hate sports. I'm not an outdoor. I'm learning to be outdoorsy because I have sons now. God has a sense of humor. I am a talker. I'm an emotional basket case. Before I met Kelly, I crocheted, stitched, anything artistic and art and music. I have a bachelor's in music. None of that fits the right stereotype. And I didn't realize that a lot of this was building me towards in a sense, a wrong direction, but it wasn't wrong. But the culture is now telling me because of this, especially church culture, that it is wrong. So as I get older, I'm like, there's more and more of me that's broken, that needs fixing. Then I meet this woman who's really intellectual and a thinker, and sees the world in a very different way than I do, and I start realizing, wow, Kelly, my wife, it's interesting to see that. And all of a sudden, for the first time for me, I was able to go, I'm not broken. Weird maybe, or different, or definitely need to mature, but if we're not careful, it's these stereotypes that actually do a lot of damage. Your young man's growing up, and he's not the football type, he's more artsy, and all of a sudden we freak out. Either go too overboard, trying to make him into the man he needs to be, or coddling every little whim that these little girls who are like, so not going to wear a dress, and you put pink near me, and okay, it's okay. We already have judgments in our head, though, as to whether that is or isn't okay.
Well, I was like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was a college athlete, and I was like that, the gender thing. But I never questioned my sexuality. Never questioned that I was going to get married to a man and was attracted to a man. But I was the one who climbed the trees and did all that stuff. So
Yes.
you can.
Well, so think of that story and interject the culture back in your story in like 5th or 6th grade.
Right.
And the culture is saying, oh, we know who you are. One of my clients, I had this, they were called by the school system, the school. They said, we're going on a field trip. I think this girl was 12, going on a field trip to some other state. We're not sure who to room her with. They literally asked that question. Not sure who to room her with, the boys or the girls. Please tell us. It's a girl. Well, she hasn't decided yet.
Oh my.
School's saying this. Certain teachers are saying this. All of her friends are saying this. And I think of that 12-year-old girl who's going, why am I even having this conversation? She's an athlete. She's a football player. When I met her, I wouldn't have known it was a girl, actually. Okay? And if you notice around the room, we don't all look the same. Thank God, there are differences. Can we celebrate those differences, even in her? But what's happening in the home is going to be the big issue, is how they encourage or discourage. Because last I checked, that's actually the parental executive team is where it should be kind of starting and stopping, but it's not. It's, oh, honey, you want to do this? Sure. Whatever you think, whatever you feel. And one of the questions that we all ask really is, who am I? I don't think we ever stop asking that question. Who am I? That a lot of us, even right now, might be still wrestling with, who am I? You're going to a job you hate. Who am I? You're in a marriage, you kind of feel a little stuck. Who am I? You're stuck in a life stage with kids or with certain things going on. You're like, am I ever going to get out of this? Health issues. This is not fair. Financial issues. This is so not fair. Like, we ask these questions, I think very honestly so. Who am I? This one gets a lot more at the core. Who am I? Gender. Versus, how can I help celebrate you and the uniqueness of you? That when it comes down to, so what does Scripture say? Actually, I'll give that in a second. It's very clear that God created male and female. And if you think of even chapter 26, or verse 26, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth except mosquitoes. So God created man in his own image, the image of God created him, male and female, he created them. There's something beautiful there. Can we celebrate that difference between male and female in that creation? And we like to go back to Genesis and go, well, whose fault was it for the fall? Well, she ate the fruit. It's like, well, who was the doofus there being silent? And we look at even marriage and go, what's the consequence of the fall? For him, it's to toil the land, which I can't remember the last time I've toiled any land, but work. And then for women, there was two. Pain in childbirth, and epidural. And what? And her desire will be to rule over him. Her desire will be to rule over him. Think about our culture, what's happening. Men are going, and women are stepping up. Men are going, women are stepping up. Everywhere. The church probably would not exist really without the leadership and the involvement of women. To the also detriment of how many men are not stepping up. Then go into the home. How many men walk in their home and they feel like they're a third wheel in their own home? Because this is her domain we've created. Some of these again stereotypes, but this is her space and the kids, and he's this outsider. Well, that was created over time through decision after decision after decision that didn't make, when Dad walks in the door, Miley and our dog's the one that runs to me anymore, but that'll end at some point. I get probably 30 kisses a day from Miley. I don't like the dog doing that, but the boys did for a while, and then they get older, and I guess after you kick them out, right? Go. Time to go make a difference in the world. Except if you think of the age, like Alex is 13. 13? Where should you be at 13? I think historically, about 13, so many kids by then were full-time on the farm. Yet, how many 25-year-olds can't? 30-year-olds that still live in the basement, which I tell the parents, flood the basement. Get them out of there. There's time and a place for that. There's also time and place to, no, it's time to go, it's time to fly. It's hard. And every family, that's part of where what would be easy is for me to go, okay, here are the answers. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. It's not that simple. I want it that way. Tell me what to do, God. Or even church. This is how you, okay, I can go through a checklist. It's not that simple. I as you know with your own children, how they were literally experiments. And you're only working with part of the data. You don't know what else is going on in their head, in their heart, what they're struggling with. That kid who is, I remember James Dobson saying, he walks into the home of one of his best friends, amazing ministry leader, amazing family, very in the church, and their 17-year-old attempted suicide. They're like, why? You have everything. You know you're his. You know you're Christ's. You have an amazing family. It was one kid at school that just nicked away at his soul. It takes one person that led to him thinking that the only answer in that moment was suicide. The rest of the world just kind of faded. It only takes that one. So reverse that too. It takes that one to make incredible change. You have that conversation with that little kid who's about to kill themselves, and you didn't realize that, but you gave them a little spark. It leads to them taking that spark to, and how that plays out is incredible. From simple conversations like, so what does it mean to be a man? Can we take that too far? I think so. I think that's kind of where the gender war in our culture, I actually think is kind of wanted. That as in a church, we've gone too far with this is what the man is and this is what the woman is. And it's like, yes and no. So, again, rhetorical in a moment, for right now, is it okay for the wife to work outside the home? Historically, what was the way things didn't work? The wife was where? Home. Not the case anymore. What's changed? Well, I cannot tell you the amount of couples I've talked to where the conversation is, well, we found out we were having children, and we sold our 2,000 square foot house and bought a 3,000 square foot house, because I guess kids are big, I don't know, and sold the little car and got a minivan, and now I have to work. Not get to. It's like, oh. So you're supporting something that you actually doesn't sound like you really want to support. This is a familial thing. This is a systemic. We need to talk about that. You're great, you have the house. I think of doctors nowadays. How many have this incredible salary? And it's like, most of the ones I know, when you ever enjoy anything. One of my good friends that I meet with every few weeks, a doctor, he's I think it's 40 or 50 patients a day. And he works 6 days a week. Like, is the $300,000 or $400,000, whatever you make, worth it? I don't think it is. You could probably get a lot happier sometimes at Walmart. Anywhere. Find a bookstore you love to work at. Work is a bookstore. Just love what you do. As in, it's not the pay, it's the heart. It's the what you do, which is really incredible. Now, this other word, though, sexuality. And I want you to think about this in a different. So gender would mean more personal. But sexuality is kind of relational. It becomes relational in the sense of husband and wife. But it's also just the friendships that we hold and the relationships we hold in general. What do you do with that? How do you play out the healthy relationships? What I didn't understand for me, my story, was that when I met Kelly and we created a family, we got married, that to me I'm like, great, I have all I need. Which is what I see very typical with a lot of guys. And it was years later when she actually reached out and sought a mentor and started talking to this older lady in Georgia that led to community Bible study and just a lot of amazing influence on her, that I needed that too. That if I don't have men in my life, I'm going to be lesser so of a husband and a father and everything else, other hat I wear. That those men are critical. And those are relationships too. We don't tend to use that word sexuality, but it kind of is. All relationships become that, how we play this out. Now, the sexual part, obviously we kind of play into the act of sex or sexuality. Versus intercourse is really the word we say or celebrate, if you will. What are our teens doing? What are some of the areas where they're doing something sexual with others that we would really have a problem with or worry about? intercourse. What else?
Oral sex.
Oral sex. That's the kind of acceptable, hey, this isn't the real thing, so we can goof around. Yep.
Just making out.
Yeah. Which, I don't know about any of you, kissing is meant to rev up engines, so it's not meant to stop there. So it's kind of funny to me how we think of dating, kissing as kind of the top. So maybe it should not be. Let's think about when we add the kissing part in, I think we might add it in prematurely. Which, again, that's getting into a whole conversation about dating. Sexting. Which, by the way, you send a naked picture of yourself to someone else, that is now child pornography. That's in trouble. So if you send it of yourself to like a teenage boy or someone else, it's child pornography, but it's not prosecutable in a sense. If that kid sends it to someone else, now it's prosecutable. And every state's trying to figure things out because they don't know what to do. It's scary. Our culture has now said gay marriage is okay. What's next? Well, right now, in the last year, the push has been pedophilia is another sexual orientation. That if I'm attracted to children, which is pedophilia, have a sexual proclivity to children and to being sexual with children, that's a natural. What's next? It's like, we live in Oregon. I have a lot of college students that they even have the audacity to tell their friends that they're getting married, like opposite sex, husband, wife. How would you settle for that? Because say Portland is just north of us, and then Seattle for sure, that is the mecca for polyamory. The new freedom is polyamory. Have multiple spouses, starting with polygamies on the tail end of that. What do you do with that? As your 10, 11, 12-year-olds processing, who am I? Who should I be? What should I do? When little Joey comes to class and he talks about his two moms or his two moms and dad and whatever combination, and you're going, that kid's mind blown. What do I do with that? Every TV show. There's too much on Netflix. It's just terrifying. We don't watch the live TV. Oh gosh, the shows that are coming out, it's just one after the other. It's just push a little further. A few years ago, Glee, that new TV show Glee, incredible music. Oh my goodness, the music was just sucked you in. Loved actually the music. The producer of the show said his goal for the show, which by the way he did not achieve, the goal for his show was, I want to have the first rear entry scene on network television in anal sex. I think of the ethics. Again, this is playing out something. The ethics behind why we're in such a mess. The questions being asked. A lot of times our kids are struggling with things that we wouldn't even know what to do with to find the answer because we've never even heard some of this stuff. Which is where you go, let me go research that. You don't Google it. Let me go research that. Let's find some answers. Let's help. Let's talk through this. And then us as parents going back there, we've got to be able to go back there and have that question. So I've been doing this. I was actually ironically teaching this when I met Kelly. So 16, 17 years ago. Back then it was a 12-week class. Now I've got it under 4. But I have this online as well. And it goes through this. Session 1, honoring God in our relationships. So God's sexual economy, healthy sexuality, what is attraction? When are you ready to marry? With Alex and Blaze, we did the passport to purity and talked through all that. And with Alex, it was interesting. We get through to the end, and he's having to make a decision. Like, am I going to really let my dad and mom lead in this, or am I going to just do whatever I want? This was like at 9, he's 13 now. Blaze, he was the one like, penis, yay! So you just, oh my gosh, the guy's kid's nuts. So we'll be coming back to that, and back to that, and back to that, and back to that. Oh, every kid's an experiment. They're very different and unique. And then, so this one, we talked through just that foundation of relationships even in general. Number 2, second session, dating and courtship. And then give a different vocabulary for it. It's funny how much kids today, teens today, buck at that word courtship because of what they've heard. But how beautiful it is, that model of that. But then how many different varieties of it is. So I kind of walk through that. And requirements for successful dating, questions to ask, how to have an affair. So I teach you how to have an affair. Because it's one of those things where you can see it a mile away if you know it's coming. And it doesn't ever just trip and fumble and or stumble and fall into an affair. You make a choice after choice after choice. So if you see that, protect. And what's romantic love? You use that as a barometer. How I feel. I mean, that's a terrifying barometer. So we unpack that. Session 3. This is why I do this. So sex ed in the past has been, or in a lot of places, STDs that scare you. Pregnancy, by the way, is the most feared STD. Think about that. A girl doesn't walk into a crisis pregnancy center or anywhere else fearing she has a deadly disease that's going to kill her. It's, am I pregnant? It's scary. It's like, and once they go, I'm not pregnant, great. Well, wait a minute, we've got some tests to run now, because there's other things that could kill you or sterilize you. So it's interesting, it's scary, it's sad, and I still talk to young ladies where they're pregnant but they don't even know how they got pregnant, why they were never taught anything. It blows my mind to think that, but yes, that's true. So, what my philosophy of dating and this relationship stuff is then, I want to help you paint a picture of what you want over there. And it be so clear that it makes decisions today humorous. That if you know what you're shooting for, then today I can look at the temptation or look at the desire or the attraction or the want and go, that's fun, because I want that. So I've been teaching that for, actually before I met Kelly, 17, 18 years. I really strongly believe that painting that picture, and it goes through. So what is 10 things to remember about sex? Actually, about great sex. Talk about what does an amazing honeymoon look like? And part of the picture painted in great sex is, it's not all it's cracked up to be. Because when that's the focus, we're just two things doing something that animals do, which is what our culture seems to say, versus it's a relationship. It's a relationship. So my human sexuality class, same thing. I teach about, this is all about a relationship, not something you do. And unpacking that's really, really important. And then the last one, ironically, a key factor of healthy relationships is how do you handle conflict. John Gottman says that he can in one conversation prior to the wedding guess with a 94% accuracy whether you'll stay married based off watching one conflict. This is one of the absolute keys as to marital success. You see them fight like cats and dogs, they're going to fight like cats and dogs, and it's just going to get worse when you're in close quarters. You see them growing and learning and learning skills and patience and being able to listen and active listening and all these things. It's amazing. Freedom to be, freedom for you to be you, freedom for me to be, but also iron sharpens iron. And this is a relationship. Forgiveness becomes a critical piece of this as we talk through a lot of the conflict stuff. So that's what our kids need, right? That's what we actually need then as parents to then teach. Because where are they getting a lot of their teaching?
Your friends.
Friends. The main 2 places I saw in the data was porn and peers. That's where they're getting their data from. They're learning from that. Which means if it's from porn, good luck ever measuring up. You will never, ever, ever measure up, and it will fall to pieces at some point. Because that porn is always new, always exciting, always something fresh, if you will. The same old is, well, it's always going to be lesser. It's really scary. So think about this passage here, Matthew 19:12. For there are eunuchs who are born that way, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others. And there are those who choose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept it should accept it. One of the things that I have in terms of conversations a lot is, especially on that word attraction, is I talk to a guy who's going, you know what, I'm not really attracted to anyone. I'm like, great. What does it probably mean? There's one key factor for men that drives that.
Testosterone?
Yes, it's testosterone. Yes, good job. And that's it. It's like you probably have a low testosterone level. And probably even naturally so, okay? So, but what do they hear when they look at the culture? I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. Or, I can't remember what state it was, State University, the professor challenged the males in the class. I want you to ask a girl out sober, take her out sober, and come home sober, and you'll get extra credit. Why? Because he had found that most of these boys had slept with tons of women, but they'd never been on a date. How we relate to this part of ourselves is so critical, and it's only getting more and more dangerous and more and more just about pleasure, excitement, thrill, versus stewardship. So what I see even in this passage is there's a lot of people that live contrary even to the way they feel. So I see actually a lot of, I had couples, we call them mixed orientation couples. So she's straight, I guess you would say. He has same-sex attraction, but he's married to a woman. It's funny, whatever you feed grows. So if he is going and having affairs, it's funny how he's constantly pulling away from his wife. If he's dying to that, and submitting himself to Christ, focusing on loving his wife, even though he doesn't feel what he sees the culture says he's supposed to feel towards her, it's amazing how it starts to grow. Does it grow to what others might feel or experience? No, probably never. That's okay. And then what do we do with a traditional biblical sexual ethic when it comes to marriage, when it comes to homosexuality, transgender? This is critical. We'll be diving into that in a second. Colossians 3:5. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. And what have we done? We've actually made a lot of the sexual stuff idols. Entitlement or worship. Think of that word worship. That's the word that I get kind of, what do I worship? Where do I spend my time? I think we can worship our jobs to a very negative place. We can worship our husband or wife, or the role that I'm in. I am a mom. And it can be a dangerous versus, man, I have a burden and stewardship and the weight of the world of being each of these positions or titles. Where I worship the one day I'm going to have a husband or wife. I put that as an idol. It's a scary place. Because where do I put my faith? My faith isn't in Kelly. My faith isn't on anything else on this earth meant to be put on him. But how do I play that out? When we see it played out in life. Where's my faith? The things that I grab onto and hang onto a little too tight. It's my being a control freak. It's really scary. This is us. What kind of stuff am I actually obsessing about? Politics. Ooh. That can get messy. Man, it can consume us. Teenager, sexual stuff, the things he or she thinks and feels consumes. I'm not worried about their next math test. It's, does he like me? Does she like me? It's all those other things. And then what are we doing at home? What kind of conversations are being had at home? It's really critical. 1 Thessalonians 4. It is God's will that you should be sanctified. That you should avoid sexual immorality. That each of you should learn to control your own body in a way that is holy and honorable. Not in passionate lust, like the pagans who do not know God. And that in this manner, no one should wrong should wrong or take advantage of a brother or sister, the Lord will punish all those who commit such sins, as we told you and warned you before. For God did not call us to be impure, to live a holy life. Therefore, anyone who rejects this instruction does not reject a human being, but God, the very God who gives you His Holy Spirit. Do I know how to live? Now, it's easy, we actually look at, not necessarily this passage, but others, and we go, okay, homosexuality, we condemn, and we just move on. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, look at what else is around that. When's the last time you were greedy? When was the last time we were a gossip? How we then put ourselves all in that boat of we're all sinners that deserve one thing. And be careful of that. It's really critical. How we address this. But then, how do I then come back to, but here's what I have to live on, the scriptures say. Here's who I'm not to be. That's a critical one. So, 3 words I'm going to use here. Code's the first one. This becomes a way for us to think through, what am I building? As you think of yourself, your family, and what you're doing at home. Again, the workbook kind of walks through this in much more detail as it walks through scripture and walks through what do I believe. Family code. This is where you came from. Think of these areas. Rites of passage, significant tasks, logical consequences, and grace deposits. What did you learn from your home? Because whatever you learn from your home, you now brought into today, and now you play those out in a relationship, probably with a spouse who has their own different ones, and there's conflict there. What are rites of passage? How do you know? How does your young man or young woman know they're an adult? Well, when many of you were young, what was the marker of I'm an adult now? Driver's license.
First drink.
First drink. Graduation. What's it today? What is the mark where a kid saying, hey, I'm an adult now? What age? What age are you seeing these at?
10, 11, 12.
10, 11, 12? Or younger?
Yeah.
Elementary schools are going, we're having to have a cell phone policy, yes. Because, well, I need to always be able to reach my kid. No, you don't. Chip them. Just kidding. Go to the vet, get them chipped. Sorry. I was just wondering if I could do that with ours. We have a GPS of anywhere we go. That's why we do that. And I would say out of love, out of care, out of protection, smart. If I've got an 8, 9, 10-year-old with this device that's like, I'm an adult now, and my brain is light years from being developed. Not till 25, your prefrontal cortex catching up. Yay, all the decisions we made before 25. What's been my experience with grace? This is where sometimes our church culture shapes us drastically. We don't realize, man, growing up in that church was so oppressive. Or, wow, I could get away with anything in that church. Or family. Or significant tasks, though. Cracks me up how many people go, oh, you're a college professor and you can fix things in your house. I'm like, yeah, it's called Book for Dummies. Go to Home Depot, there's this rack, it's got all the books. Do it. But my dad taught me to fix, well, to be cheap, but to fix anything. One time we had a leak in our roof for 1.5 years in Georgia. When I finally got around to paying someone, it was $120. Like, I spent way more on that. Every time it rained, we had buckets around the house. Cheap, and that can bite you in the rear sometimes. But I was hanging cabinets one time. So, putting the kitchen in. You know how to do? Yeah. Why? Someone helped me learn 6 just skills. If something was wrong with an engine, can you fix it? Little things like that. My sister, that was one of her proudest moments. I actually was in college and I slipped and cut myself, and we were changing the brakes and doing the whole brake job. When I got back, she had finished it because she had learned too. So it was kind of cool to watch. That's where the stereotype. She can do that. Her husband's an incredible cook. Think of the stereotypes. This is where it gets us into trouble. When we have these categories of cook and cars and guns and whatever else, it gets us into trouble. This one here, though, this is the one that I spend my time on, is this vision of growth and maturity. And it's these categories. What is masculinity? What is femininity? What are my spouse standards? What are those things I'm not going to do? Sexual boundaries. When we've had this conversation here, and then we come here and the temptation comes, we process things different. If you teach your little kid, little boy, little girl, stranger danger, and don't talk to strangers, and then they're grabbed off the street, you don't usually hear them yell, do you? They're put in a car and driven off, you've never heard from them. That's the story. The irony is that's not preparing them. You need to prepare them to kick, to scream, to grab, to throw a tantrum. That's counterintuitive to what we tend to teach in home. But that protects against 9% of abuse. The other 91% is from someone we know, love, and probably have vetted. Family. It's scary. Well, where is someone silenced when they haven't been trained to actually deal with what's coming? Raise your hand. Sorry. Connie. Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't want it.
But that's where, if you think of the process for trauma, if I come into a moment of, there's 3 words: fight, flight, freeze.
I've read the book.
Good job. Yeah. The freeze is the one that actually traps trauma in, and we're actually in trouble. I never even heard of freeze until 2 years ago. The freeze is actually what gets us into trouble. So you have that moment and you just freeze and you endure, you survive. It's actually a beautiful defense mechanism to the moment, but the fallout is tremendous. It's lifelong. And so as we look at trauma stuff, you literally hold that trauma in your body, which is where when you adopt a child, and they're 1 or 2, and they come with so much that they don't remember what their body does. It starts making sense why a child, even from young, has something that happened and they don't even know, and they'll never know what their body knows. It's terrifying. It's creepy, actually. But the more you understand it, to me, there's so much beauty of the freedom and path to hope. That's one of my favorite classes. It teaches trauma therapy, but it's one of the most difficult. My students say in the evaluations every year, "This is the worst class I ever had. Everyone should take it." I can't sum it up better, because it's a nightmare in some sense to walk through sexual abuse. But the hope is beautiful. You can see and understand that process. When you have these standards in place, when you come to a moment of decision, you've already made the decision. It changes that moment, a moment of a potential crisis. If you walk into marriage believing that I'll leave if it gets rough, you'll leave. If you walk into marriage with, well, I guess I'm stuck, there is no outsies. Actually, what I use in my college students is reach for that divorce card and go, crap, I don't have a divorce card. Can't play that. Okay, what you feel in the moment, I gotta work it out, yes. It changes everything, because the decision was made way back then versus the moment. We want to help our young men know, what does it mean to be masculine? And no, it's not some of these lists of things that gets us stuck. It's more than that. Because how many boys go, I'm not going to play an instrument, that's not. They dismiss. The irony is, if you look at, of all the things that our kids can be doing, it's instruments. That they should cut sports before they should cut instruments, because of what it does to the brain. It's the only thing that when you practice a musical instrument, it is a whole brain. It's using the whole brain. So anyone that's an educator, like that makes those decisions, it's amazing. The things they cut, it's the things that probably would help our kids more. Where they've seen them take a kid out of a really, really rough situation, and they've grown up just completely ignored and neglected, put them in music lessons, and it starts rewiring their brain as they start coming out of that fog that they were kind of put into by lack of stimuli. It's incredible. I love all that. Again, the neuroscience stuff is just so cool. And when you have those standards of a spouse, it becomes, you can look at a person, be attracted all you want, and laugh and walk away. So if you find out someone's married, hopefully you have a boundary there. But it's funny how many go, oh, they're a good person. They're not a Christian, but they're a good person. I'm like, really? Okay, let's go back to the Bible. What does it say? To not be unequally yoked. Okay, so, and then we fast forward. Let's play out, how is this going to play out in terms of how you do life together? I see a lot of couples come to counseling when their child hits about 2 or 3 or elementary, going into elementary. And the reason is like, we know there's something about that whole faith thing. We kind of want it for them. It's like, but if it's 2 years, it's hard to sell, if you will. This last one, to me, is a huge one. Again, one I feel like we're losing our young people like crazy. It's a cause to fight for. How are you impacting? You're going to impact others for the better. Many of you are here right now for that purpose. It's what you do here at this church. It's the lives you invest in. So it's not just a job. One of the things that I realized is that's where you can get messy and turn it all into just the job of ministry. You can have a job, but what do you do the job for? It's amazing when you do your job to support your family and you have the right heart, and then your life is way bigger than just a job. What do you do with that? How do you help raise a young man or woman to be able to say, we need to have a cause to fight for? Our kids in Oregon, man, they're grabbing on to everything, social justice. And I get the heart behind it. What scares me is the tactics. Get the heart. Which is where we as a church need to think through that. Yeah, I mentioned that was a porn portal. All these things are. Yeah, let's let you think on that one for a little while. This is our teenagers now. And they look at the mom and the daughter, one on the upper, and they do what we do. That's kind of that stage we're in. We're realizing, okay, our kids, what's the boundary we have around the phone and devices and TV, anything, because it's like, it just highlights it more. So they're watching, and if they're always on a game, always have to have a device, there's damage there. And we'll see more in the next few years as to how severe. We don't have the solitude and the downtime like we used to. We just sit. It's a big one. I have a hard time with that, just sitting. I always go. Realizing that's a critical piece. So this is the model I created from those 3 for you to think about where these apply. So it's these 3 things, and it's in these 4 areas: health, purpose and soul, your relationships, and your work. So you think about this sexual ethic piece and how it relates to your health. There's a whole list of what we could talk about in terms of how it affects your health, impacts your health, and the things that we should do for your purpose, your soul, with your relationships, boundaries, and/or even what you do or why you do it with your work. But on the health side, there's basic things we all need to be doing: nutrition, rest, exercise. It affects us. It affects all our relationships. It affects how we do work. It affects how we worship. The whole. One of the things we've done in our world is we siloed out jobs. Here's the shrink deals with the head, the doctor deals with the body, and the minister deals with the soul. And it's like, but they don't know they're supposed to be siloed. So what I've seen is some of the best therapists are the ones who have a deep understanding of the Bible and of the physical. Some of the best doctors are the ones that have, again, the same, the whole person, which is incredible to think about. Purpose and soul. Just how do you practice spiritual disciplines? What does that look like? What's your relationship with studying and learning and growing and meditation? Relationships, are you investing in them? Are they a priority? What's your community look like? And then, are you a lifelong learner? What's your work ethic? And then balance is a weird word. Because it's one of those where, I would say never have balance in our work and life. Can you be fully present at work and do your job well, and then be fully present at home? That's I would say, the difficulty. Or you're at home but not quite there. And then you're at work and you're not quite there. I think that's an important piece. And then I call these my self-care, my passion, my team, and then my fruits. What do you do with those? This is what you're building, if you will. And so when you walk through the book and workbook, you're walking through building the piece of the sexual ethic, what am I then teaching my children or those that I'm serving? It's really important. So the point that we actually need to really wrestle with and think about is either I do or someone else does. Someone's going to teach your kids. Someone is teaching your kids. Every TV show is, everything they consume, every song, every piece of music, all their friends. And what are you doing? Where's your part in that? Are you being intentional? So what I'll do right now, if you need to get up and bathroom or grab a little snack, you can do that. I want to spend this next little time looking through the age categories. The first category is birth to 5, age, it's rarely too early, and we're going to talk about what that means. This is a stage of exploration and curiosity. 6 to 10, micro conversations are critical here. And they're fact-finding and gathering of clues, and then 11 to 17, this is where social media technology and stewardship and boundaries. What I tell parents all the time is when your kid hits 10, 11, 12, your parenting is done. What? So think about it. The kind of person you created is pretty much made by 10, 11, 12. Now you're starting to see the product. What do you do with that? You have a teenager that you want to strangle half the time as their hormones are going and all sorts of things are happening. But at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, they are becoming their own person and they are naturally separating from you. Are you facilitating that, or are you making it more difficult? Are you encouraging that and helping them in that, or are you actually part of the problem? It's a big one. Where is the talk in this? No time?
The whole time. Maybe.
The whole time?
Yeah.
Okay. Should be, yeah. When I survey college students and they even mention that there was the talk, where was it at?
11 or 12.
16.
Yeah, up here, this third one. But towards the middle, yeah. All right, it's time for us to talk, and the kid's like, "Oh, Dad, what do you want to know?" Oh, it's scary. That's where, so the tagline of my book was going beyond the talk. Why it is not about the talk. The talk is humorous. The talk starts when they're 1. It's when Miley stood up in the bathtub one day and goes, "When am I going to get a penis?" Yeah. What's up with that? And the conversation's over 20 seconds later, and they moved on. Or the first time they ask about sperm, egg, what, and they go, "That's weird," and they walk away. They're on to the next thing. That's how their brains work. And then there's that day they're like, "You do gross!" Okay? A little more happened, but you have to facilitate that. We have to facilitate that. We do not leave it to them. Our kids, we've left books, these kid age appropriate books in their books in the mix, so they come every once in a while, and that was part of it, but it was way more than that. It was constant, kind of coming back to these conversations. So here, this birth to 5. Think about that when we do the talk, typically. What would be the kind of things you need to talk about to a child up to the age of 5?
Body parts.
Body parts, okay? Basic names of body parts. What else?
No-go zone.
A no-go zone, yes.
Like wherever your bathing suit is, nobody at the doctor touches.
Yeah, so kind of start setting some of those boundaries.
Keeping things covered.
Yeah, keeping things covered. And I know there's a big fight if you look at a lot of the articles on Facebook about modesty. And so, can you say, or should you say yes or no, whether you should or shouldn't cover this or that? That's every family's got to make that decision. We got some clothes, I can't remember from whom, like some hand-me-downs, and there was this little sports bra. And Marley puts it on. And so the next statement I make was, that's awesome underclothes. Creating that. What's the first thing my sisters did when they left college, or left high school and went to college?
More short shorts.
Bikini. They're like, we're going to do what we weren't allowed to do as kids, that kind of thing. Which I guess if you're going to rebel that way, let's go for it. But we have to we're setting some kind of stage or standard, yes or no. There's always, whether it's really strict, or whether it's, hey, whatever you want, or if you got it, flaunt it mentality. Some families live that way too. What else? This stage, birth to 5. Think back when you were younger, birth to 5, you were to be seen and not heard. How many lived in that? Or we wouldn't talk about any of this stuff. 5-year-old, which is about to enter into kindergarten here, or already went into pre-K, or might have even been in daycare. You better have been, and we find this out the hard way as things start playing out and stuff. What's different from when you were at this stage to when your kids were at this stage?
My parents didn't know about it either. They didn't know how to talk about it.
Yeah, we just didn't talk about
They
it.
just didn't talk about it. It was dirty. It was wrong. So you grew up thinking everything was dirty and wrong.
Yeah, it's all dirty and wrong, yes.
So I didn't do that with my kids.
Yeah.
I talked about it with my kids.
I remember my version of the talk sometime in teenage years, and my dad and I are driving, and my dad said, "Son, have you heard of masturbation?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "Okay."
Good, I don't have to tell you.
Not helpful. Versus talking through, how do you have that conversation? How do you have that conversation?
He's gonna do it.
Hmm?
Gotta do it. It's gonna be awkward for both of you.
Do it as in masturbate?
Talk
Oh,
about it.
sorry. Talk about it, okay.
Conversation.
What does that look like? How do I actually talk about the M word?
Openly. I mean, just openly talk about it and have, you're going to have these feelings. Let's talk about it.
So you need to talk about the feelings that you have that lead to.
That leads
I only know one way that it's usually talked about, and it's just bad sin and oh my gosh, I can't even believe you brought this up.
My
That's
whole
how it's talked
conversation
about.
was son, and he goes, "Oh, Dad." That was it. He didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah. And so one of the rules of thumb that I've been really seeing and really realizing myself, but also I put up there micro conversations. These are not conversations. A lot of this is us talking and them hearing and planting seeds. If you think of that 6-year-old walking into elementary school, you've planted seeds whether you did it intentionally or not, of what you did talk about and what you didn't, and then how they interpreted all that too. There's that whole mess of how they interpret your beliefs and your saying, and then how they filter that through what they see their friends. So how do you talk about this one that, I've almost always seen the masturbation word is that's just sin. We don't talk about it, we don't go there, we don't do it. Or really it's, we don't talk about it, everyone's doing it, but we don't go there. Like that's what ends up being said. It's like, how do I help my son or and daughter navigate their body? Well, it starts here at birth to 5. You start talking about their body and what feels good. When they start learning their anatomy, and they start learning, I talk to grown women that don't know what a clitoris is all the time, which is sad to me. Yay. Our educational system, if you will. How do I plant a seed of helping them understand that their body actually gives them messages, if you will, and they have to decide what to do with that. And that pleasure isn't sin, but there are boundaries. And then here's why we have those boundaries, and it's back to that, here's what I would hope for you, but you have to grab onto your picture of that. So in the book, this is another section that's going to get me in a lot of trouble probably, but in the book, I actually walk through a scenario of that. How do you talk about, and I do this with guys and girls all the time. They say they're masturbating, and I'm like, great. And what do they expect me to say?
You shouldn't do that.
Yeah,
That's wrong.
they're wanting me to go, and I'm like, I don't respond, basically, and they're kind of like, and then they continue the conversation, because they're expecting me to condemn. Like, do whatever you want in your own time. But then we walk through a process of, where's your heart? What do you really want? Oh, so when you see that girl and you take her, and you make her something of your own fantasy in your own head, does it draw you closer to her? Or does it pull you further away? I want you to start paying attention to that. Have I told them, don't do it? No, not yet. And we walk through this process of how their brain works as to, what do I really want? And start realizing, oh, I do have choice. And what I've found is for most men, not actually a lot of women, but for most men, that habit is just purely habitual and actually has very little brain power involved. It's just a choice they make. I'm going to do this to go to sleep. It can get chronic, but it can, for me, it's just something, it's like, no, let's get it out of, and this is how I think about it. My unconscious or my non-conscious is like my operating system. I want to get it into the conscious where I'm actually taking every thought captive, choosing. And there's something really powerful about the next step. Confession. So I want you and I are terrible at this. When things rattle around in my unconscious or my operating system, it's amazing. I don't tend to get very far, or it gets really bad. When I start choosing, I'm now more in control. So it's like, I want you to choose whether you're going to do this or not. Don't just do it. Well, why? And what do you really want? And what's the bigger picture? It's like, oh. And so I love it. I have these guys that come back a few weeks later and are like, I haven't done that at all anymore. It's like, great. You probably will at some point. Why? Because now this is a drug of choice whenever you're stressed or escape. So is every single other door you opened. If you tried a drug that actually worked, you probably want to go back there. If you tried alcohol and it worked, you probably want to go back there. If you looked at pornography and it worked, whatever drug, is food your drug? Whatever your way of comfort, we all have that default. It starts right here, before they're even 6 years old. Developmentally, birth to 7 is some of the most critical, and it's literally downhill after 7. The way that our brains are growing and forming, it's incredible what's happening in those first 7 years. A time where if you look back in history, we've tended to kind of not do much investing at all. Think about even as a church. Maybe we should rearrange church and the 0 to 7-year-olds seem to be in here, being just poured into. Why? Because the rest of us are lost causes, right? Not really, but think about it. We do. We kind of just, they're over there. Versus, my goodness, they're in the most formidable and mold-shaping, molding time of their life. How are we investing in even, and I know this sounds crazy, a sexual ethic? Most parents I hear say they're not old I basically would say that it's rarely too early. You've got to be able to go there. So think of whatever your default is, oh, I should talk about this here, rewind about 2 to 5 years. It's actually, you probably should go there, especially with what's going on in our culture. You have to have access to any kind of media, any TV, any Netflix or Hulu or anything else. How do they make those decisions and how they have? So basic anatomy, mentioned, got to go there. Correct body part vocabulary. Call a penis a penis. It's not your wee-wee or whatever other thing it is. What do we call girls? It's not a vagina though. That's inside. It's funny. Like Miley, when she was younger, she started walking around going, my bottom hurts. Like, why are you calling that your bottom? And Kelly's like, I don't know what to call it. Because it's not your vagina. Well, it's vulva is the technical term. It's funny, that's not a very exciting word, but it is what it is. The reason for this is critical. The reason for the right vocabulary is then they know what to use when there's something wrong or something has happened. We used to have, I came probably 100 or more babysitters. We were in Georgia, kids were little. So girl after girl through the house, keep watching our kids. One of the themes we always did is we would ask them very, very regularly, did these things happen to you? You were touched? Did they try to change your clothes? Not looking for them to tell the truth. Because shame is powerful. Looking for a difference in the way they react. If they pause. If you do it regularly, you can find that. If it's once in a blue moon, you can. One time I came home and a babysitter was almost in tears. She's like, your son took a picture of his penis with my phone. I deleted it really fast. I'm so sorry. We're like, it's okay. Everyone's looking that way.
I'm sure it was the other.
It's crazy.
Gigi hadn't heard that story.
It was Mariana. Yeah, it was great. It was crazy is so that student who was one of our babysitters, she just finished her master's in trauma from my trauma therapy class. She's from Moldova, immigrant family. She finally got her citizenship. She just finished her master's. She's in her doctoral work and has been working in the trauma field with children. And I just am so proud of her. It's so cool to see. Those are way beyond my kids. Those are the kids I invest in. Many of you do the same thing, whether it's in school or it's here. Even those other kids that come to your house. They're in your house. Hey, it's a chance to preach, right? This is an area to teach about boundaries and all this. What about 6 to 10 though?
I want to back up.
Yeah, but
on that 0 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
I think that an appropriate conversation is God gave you a mommy and a daddy to take care of you, that kind of thing. So when they go to kindergarten and they read my 2 moms, they're like, that's not what Mama told me.
Yes. And so
Mama said that God put a mommy and a daddy, my daddy loves me, my mommy loves me, we're a family. And that way I'm in all respect to single parent families too. But still, to begin to plant the idea of a traditional home.
Well, one of the things I say to single parents, which is so critical, because I'm usually dealing with the mom. Only a few times I've had the dad. This is when I was in Kansas. But the mom, it was like, you need to stop saying you're both the mother and father. You're not. You're just the mom. Mm-hmm. And when you let that other piece go, there's incredible freedom there. And then you go, so what's missing? Not a dad. Because when you go get married to the next person you find, is they need another male role model and figure in their life. So we've actually, in our Boy Scout troop, we've told the single moms, you're like, you're not invited. And they're like, thank you. As in, we only have dads going on campouts. We try it with the moms, and they're like, don't run with that, don't do that. No moms, no. It's different than just dads. But this is also about us dads investing in not just my son, but these other sons. And some of these sons, they don't have a dad. just at. This is, so you think of that, they walk into California, into the school, kindergarten, and you know they're going to teach those 15 genders. You can get mad about that, or you can go, if my kid is going in there, yes, I'm gonna be proud when they get into the principal's office going, ah! But what I'm hearing from families is, no, my kid's not old enough. And then they take them to the school bus and send them on. Wait a minute, no. They're may or may not be old enough or mature enough. It's just, we've got to go there. And it's planting seeds. It's baby steps. So you have the same conversation over a 2 or 3 year period, and they're getting more and more of it. And you think, I'm going to tell my 2-year-old how babies are made. 2 or 3 year old's not going to process that. It's just kind of in one ear out the other, and they heard a tummy, okay, stomach. They don't get. It's as they mature and as their brain, they start catching on to more and more and more. I think I remember it was Simon, our nephew. We were at grandparents' house in South Carolina, and he looked out the window and goes, "Elephant!" And they were like, "No, those are cows." It was a simple thing. He went, "Oh, 4 legs, analysis," and then he was told, "No, not." He split that into 2. Okay, so there's now elephants and cows. And what do? We do that our whole life. We split schemas. We build more and more of these. It's really cool if we can actually lean into it and be a part of it. What I feel like we do a lot is we fight it, or we try to protect, or keep things away from them. So what about the 2 mommies? We had a family move in down the street from us 2 houses ago, Georgia and Oregon, and there was 2 mommies. This little teenage boy. It's funny that we had no rule. We had a rule that our kids wouldn't go into anyone's houses. And it's funny we actually let them into their house. It led to some neat conversations. What was really crazy, this little boy, he had 2 mommies here. He was only there for a month, but he was going back to these other 2 mommies back home because his dad was in jail. This kid is in so much trouble. What does he need more than anything? He needs us. So how do you engage in those conversations? It isn't when you condemn. Like the church's history and where we're at today is we are a place of condemnation. Of you're a sinner going to hell. It's like, yeah, we are without Christ. Or it's, I'm a Christian, but I can kind of do whatever I want. Yeah, I don't want it that way. And so the LGBT conversation is, love me as I am, period. And Christ's message is, no period there. I'm going to mess with you the rest of your life. It's called sanctification. It's called discipleship. It's called growth. I don't know about you, that makes me happy. Because it means I'm not going to stay. That's going to be, but it's not always easy or fun. And your marriage becomes that, and the people in your life becomes that. Oh my gosh, do your kids reveal? Like if I were to ask Alex anything right now, boy, would that reveal. She's already threatened me on. Don't you dare. Alex couldn't try to get up here and have a conversation. I was like, no. So she wants you to know.
He's getting a look right
Oh, no, he pulled his knife out. I don't know what he's going to do with it. I'm just kidding. Our kids become these little mini me's of us, and it's really scary when you go, oh, that's me. They're saying it the same way I said it. You know it's you. That's revealing. And we need to be able to have those conversations about masculinity and femininity and the roles that they have, and single parents, and what does it mean? You're planting the seed of marriage to a birth to 5-year-old. And then you see it different, don't you, in your sons and daughters? Daughter playing house and doing certain things sometimes, and the boys are trying to figure out what to blow up. Stereotypes again.
I think you need to always be able to answer the questions. I mean, not maybe you don't always know the answers, and you said you go research, but never ignore any question about anything. You always need to be able to, instead of being embarrassed about it, be able to answer it just frankly, openly. This is the way it is. I mean, I had this conversation just yesterday with my 7 and 9-year-old grandkids, grandboys. And we went into detail about everything because they didn't know. They wanted to know. I think you need to
And
be able to
knowledge
do that.
becomes power. Can you give them too much knowledge and they go do something wrong with it? Yes.
Sure.
Exhibit A, my second son. He's going to be the one that if you tell him, which we have, and then he goes, he's actually named his nipples right now. Stephen and Benjamin. And then he does things like, Mommy, Stephen and Benjamin want to hug you. Oh, crazy. Why? Because of this reaction right here. He'd be like, he is the center of attention. It is ridiculous. And that was me as a kid, so I'm like, oh. My parents were probably at home laughing.
Corey, is it necessary when we're trying to teach our children about sexuality and what the Bible teaches and what is right? Do we need to be telling them what they're doing is wrong? Or does that make it too combative?
I would say you have to be careful how you walk into that. I want to walk them to that understanding. So, again, as a counselor, what I'm trying to find is I want to have a response that's different than whoever's around them, many times as parents. So if they're expecting a parental answer, I want to come with a different answer, especially at first, even if I have the same conclusion later. But I would say yes, you want to actually be very careful how you just condemn this.
So what are some of the things that you can say, like, we have some friends that are homosexual, and the girls, they've been around them, and we tell them they're our friends and stuff, and that I've known them for a long time, and we worked with them. But what are some things that, because I don't say that, I just say they make different choices than we do, and from the Bible, God, instructs us that, but we still love them. But what are some other suggestions that we can say without saying the words, that's wrong, or, because I find myself saying, well, we don't believe in that, but then I'm like, wait, there should be a but there, or something like that, to where I don't want to water down what we believe, but at the same time, I don't want to say you're never going to be approached, you can never approach them, and you can never be associated with them either.
And so I think it's a lot of what you are doing. It's having those conversations. I think we do need to be very clear. I think we've actually, the last probably 7-8 years, we've gotten muddier and muddier on what we believe, and it's led to all these church splits. Now, a recent Pew poll was saying the churches that have gone more liberal and embraced homosexuality and everything else, they're shrinking. I think it's interesting. The churches that have embraced a biblical sexual ethic are actually not. They're actually growing in America, which should be very encouraging. Preston Sprinkle said that if you look at the reasons why someone that's gay or lesbian leaves the church, a lot of the conversation is it's because of your traditional belief. He said it's 3% in their research that actually leave because of standing on a strong, no, that's not it. It's not biblical. The reason why people leave, the other 97% leave because of unloving. It's because of what you're trying not to do. We were condemning, we were actually abusive. So I think the key is to be able to be very careful but very clear on the line. As they get older, you get more and more, you're trying to dig those roots deep as to what they believe, which is also, they have to work that out themselves. Where our teenagers right now are, they've embraced love. And they go, Mom and Dad, you are not loving. Because they've seen it's all a bunch of sinners going to hell, and it's of an abomination, and they've heard that, and they go, no, we're told to love, and they grab onto that. And I think they're right, but it's not without that caveat of there's discipleship, there's growth, and there is standards. If I'm showing growth, then that's part of that working it out.
Or to help maybe help the rest of us. What is medical science saying about gender? Because I'm hearing people say if well, I can't help it, God made me that way. What is science saying about all of this?
So, I can't help it, God made me that way. That's the Lady Gaga, Born This Way world that literally gay marriage was voted in 2 or 3 summers ago. Within 2 weeks, all the rhetoric changed to gender fluidity. You can't have it both ways, people. Why? I have a book on my shelf. It's called After the Ball, written in 1989, that literally says, here's what we're going to do to change America. And it's literally what's happening. Now we're coming to the end of where that book was. I wonder, and there's this very hopeful part of me as to there's going to be some neat things coming. It's not going to all just keep going downhill. But what's happened has been, we're going this way. Now, APA, they very adamantly put billions of dollars into research to prove the gay gene that came up empty-handed. And then they changed one word in their statement on APA's website, which was it may from it is genetic. What I've said from the beginning of this, so I started teaching in this area probably 13, 14 years ago, I said, let's just say it is. Why does that change our theology? They found a gene of alcoholism. Well, I guess I'm just born this way. No. Some of you are way more bent towards anger. You just, well, I guess I'm just an angry... No, it's stewardship. I've got to learn. And part of it is learning to live in society, learning to live in relationships, and it becomes me putting myself under something. And we're all putting ourselves under something. An ethic, a belief system. What do I believe?
We have a grandson who's been genetically tested and his X chromosome is mutated, and so that causes issues. He's autistic, he has seizures. But he still can be taught and still nurtured and still learn about God to make the choices he needs to make. Isn't that kind of what, like you're saying, if you're born that way, you still can be taught?
One of my, I guess, pet peeves about mental health issues, and autism is one of it's a big one that I've had a few clients recently that's really challenged me on this, is that becomes the excuse for aiming lower in life. Versus, no, the hill's going to be steeper.
It's just different.
It's different. And why can't we celebrate difference? If you think of just learning styles, I don't know if you've seen this movie, The Accountant. Great movie. Rated R, I probably shouldn't say that. Anyway. And it's a guy that's autistic. He's the accountant, he's also an assassin, which makes it a really cool movie. But at the end of the movie, they propose this question: what if a person of his mind is way superior than us? And that's even Hollywood kind of asking a really interesting question. Well, then last few years ago, the movie Split came out. M. Night Shyamalan, the Village, Signs. Very not realistic depiction of multiple personality disorder, but it asks the same question towards the end of, what if a person who's been through trauma is evolved to a higher space? I'm saying everyone, yes. The person that's been through trauma, sexual abuse or anything else, if they get help, they have an incredible radar. But I've actually seen the people that don't get help be some of the most abusive and terrifying people in the church even. Because everyone's dangerous and everyone's a problem, and they're not using that potential skill they have for good. Autism, to me, is finding that uniqueness of where they learn. Depression or anxiety, we almost get picked in this room. Which one's your nemesis? It might be both, but for some of us, for me, it's depression. Every May, I sink into a darkness sometimes that I have to I feel like I'm clawing myself out of. Why? My college students leave me. It's been really interesting to watch. Last May was my first time not to. Last May, the college students left and I went by. I was starting to write the book. I had a new baby. I had a new thing, and I realized even my own kids, I actually worry about the day when my kids are gone. I have to be really careful. My body has this bent towards depression, clinical depression. I was told in college, you need to be on medications the rest of your life. And I said, no. Tried them for a while. There are some that need to live on medications their whole life. There's some that once you get your head above water, you can pull that out and you can have a very different life. Others that need to come back and forth, but it's a tool. It's not a crutch. And what I think we're doing in our culture right now is we're creating all these crutches. Like, I love learning disabilities in college. It's one of my favorite ones because I get to mess with it. It's like, oh, you have that learning disability. How can I make it a little harder on you? I'm not saying this out loud, but I literally do. And I literally find a way for them to succeed and then to be blown away that they succeeded. That's my version of messing with someone. And so I create these systems and these ways of, oh, I have this special exemption to go do this. And I'm like, really? We're going to do this? You can join us? It's awesome. Why? Because my goal is to help them succeed. What's my goal in raising my children? But how do I measure that goal? My membership site that I created is called Family Launch Academy. And that's actually what it is. It's how as I think through what parents don't want, I want to give my kids a biblical sexual ethic. What they want is I want to launch my kids. How do they measure success? Is it money? Do they just get out of the house? What's the measurements of success?
Happiness, contentment.
Happiness, contentment. What else?
Independence.
Independence from your budget and your insurance.
Followers of Christ.
Follower of Christ. And it's actually when George Barna's research on single adults, he said that was the number one. He goes, we focus on money, we focus on going to college, we focus on all these things. It's like, what if we focused on the goal is to raise champions for Christ and all that other stuff works itself out? We measure it in, I would say, a very worldly way, but be careful. Are they a champion for Christ? It's that, what's your cause to fight for? Oh, it's such a, I don't care how much money you have. Marriage, sorry, it's hard. It doesn't solve a lot. It makes it harder. Easier and harder. It's both and. I mean, I've put Kelly through so much with my health, it's not even funny. Hard? Yeah, ask her. It's been a journey. Rewarding? Wouldn't trade it for the world. Not saying that because my in-laws are in the room.
What would you do? What would Corey do? Have a stepson. It's only been my stepson for a year and a half. I just recently married. But he's 37 years old. He's gay. And he's going to marry his partner. They're going to have a huge, elaborate wedding. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars type wedding. And I'm like, I don't know. I am not going. Everything in me says, do not go. Don't support Christmas. No, I don't believe it. Of course, my husband says, of course, I'm going to go because I don't want to lose my son. Kind of that, there's a movie kind of like that that I saw recently. And I think he's adorable. I think I love him. I do for him. I make him cupcakes to take to work for Valentine's Day. He's just sweet and wonderful. But I cannot make myself support what they're doing. What would you do?
Awesome. Okay, so I love this. I love it. My belief about marriage has always been that you don't even attend a wedding unless you're in support of that wedding, of that marriage. So your presence, it's like that act of baptism. Baptism is a public display, and those present are there to, by being present, I'm to hold you accountable to that commitment. Marriage to me is the same way, it's a sacrament. My presence is me being there. And I think some of us have weddings we've been to that we probably shouldn't have gone to. when I think that way. But then I get into this and I start processing what's the long game. I've watched friends of mine that said to their son, marrying their daughter, said to their daughter, not approving you marrying that young man, we're not attending the wedding. How do you think that affected the long game?
Lost it, probably.
We're not the ones that save people. Christ does. And it really started challenging me to think through. I before would have said, no way, no way, no way, no way, you do not go, you do not go. And then I'm like, what if the long game is I need to be there? They know what I believe. That conversation we had, I don't need to remind them even on their wedding day and ruin it for them. But Preston Sprinkle, I don't know if you've read any of his stuff, completely changed this one on me. He goes, when two guys and two girls get up and marry, there's nothing sealed in heaven. It is not a marriage. It's an expensive party. Think about that. Am I going to go to that wedding? Yeah, I'm going to celebrate you, and I'm going to keep the long game. That I'm going to love you, and I want to see you broken one day.
Unconditional love.
Something we can't do as humans, but that we're trying to do. Yeah, unconditional love. We can't be unconditional. We're so conditional. We're so judgmental. How do I play that long game? I'm there at your celebration, but there's nothing sealed in heaven. There is no wedding. Does that make sense? Because when you look back at God's Word, there was no wedding. It's a man and a woman. It is the only place that brings sperm and egg together that can make a child. What we've done in America especially is we've elevated pleasure. It's so good about it's all about pleasure, sexual peak pleasure, and you can't check out Walmart without some article saying how to get him hot and heavy or make her do this or that. It's like none of that actually matters if you're not in a relationship and commitment and depth. It's not about some ecstasy and exciting. So what's it about? And I would actually say it's the other two P's. Pleasure is important. It's great. I'm glad God made it. But the fact is, it's procreation. Two people come together to make families. Now, this is where the LGBT community years ago said, well, then if a couple marries, husband and wife marry, and they don't have a child within 2 years, then the marriage should be nullified. So, funny little push and I got it. They were actually smart. Why? Because you can't get married because you can't make kids. Well, there's a lot of couples that marry and never have children. They can't. We live in a fallen world. Does that mean you divorce because you can't? Some couples do. Well, you go find someone to make you happy because you deserve to have children. I'm like, no, you don't deserve to have children. You deserve hell. That's not careful what we deserve. Kelly doesn't deserve to be my wife, to go through what she's been through with me and my health. That's not talking about deserve. No. Some of you have been through divorces and nightmares. You don't deserve that. Some of you have had things that have happened to you or others have done that you don't deserve that in a sense. Well, we deserve hell, but pleasure? Well, the third one is protection. So pleasure, procreation, protection. The sexual part is meant to take two people that come together, and it's just us for life. And there's others out there, but it's humorous to think about because I choose you. Surrendering and committing, whether it's same-sex attraction or any other attraction outside of here, I'm pouring myself into you by choice. It's not in my operating system. I'm consciously choosing it. There may be days I'm having to verbally choose it because I want to wring your neck. That's marriage. So for your stepson, I'd say you continue that long game of hoping to see him fall on his knees someday to surrender to Christ and surrender his life. Well, part of what I love about the gospel, something that just blows my mind. If you think this is dangerous to do, if you think of re-engineering this, why doesn't God just put a tattoo on our forehead and say, this person's redeemable, so invest here, this person will never, as long as they live, so we don't waste our time on those people. He didn't do that, which I think is pretty cool. So it's not about whether he does or doesn't. The fact is we're also changed as we pursue someone else with God's love and that commitment. Even if they never ever, on their death, till their deathbed or beyond, ever give their life to Christ, we're still changed. So, hope that helps. It's hard though.
I know.
What's some reactions to that, or questions even others that might have from that?
Something that we do. I have a family that I dearly love who is gay, and we set the boundary of we agree to disagree. Love dearly, and his partner is an amazing person. However, he knows where we stand. Love him anyway. I'm gonna love him through it. Pray that they change, but try and still set that example because we're not perfect either.
What I'm looking for in those relationships, and thinking of that long game, we want to be very prayerful of, so that you're looking for that prompting of the Holy Spirit for that moment when they're receptive. So you're not just living, like I think sometimes we just do that. We just live a life. We just, for what purpose? In the end, it really isn't any. We're a Christian, but the sedation of us is terrifying. Versus, no, I am looking for that end. Looking for that day when maybe that relationship ends. Because, sorry to say, the average homosexual male has 300 to 1,000 partners in a lifetime. This is not an encouraging path. It's terrifying. Disease-wise, health-wise, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, on every level. And then look at any measurement of this. Suicide rates are higher. Depression rates are, everything's higher. The long game is I'm looking for that crack in their foundation where they're just willing to listen to a little more, and then a little more, and a little more. We're not doing the changing. The Holy Spirit is doing that work. I'm looking for that. I'm praying for that. I'm asking. It could be 20 years till the next one. We don't think that way. But what if it were? What if it was 20 years of silence, and then there's that moment of crisis, and you're able to go, God still loves you.
Isn't that the same attitude we should have towards our children that have walked away from the church?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. What's the goal? Ridicule them? Make them? No, it's to play that long game. And to be prayerful and to be that steady. Who's present when they fall apart? If you've been absent for 10 years and you haven't talked, well, they're not coming to you. If you've been that steady, then life falls apart, which it always does for everyone at some point. When it does, you're there and you're like, we got to talk. Been waiting for this day.
We've made that statement. Where are all of your friends now? Mom and dad are still here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's a friend of ours, it's not us.
I'm not this kind of on the same topic, but I was wondering, what does the research say about people who are homosexual? Okay, first of all, a gay man. What does the research say about a gay man and an absent father in childhood? And then also, what does the research say about a gay woman and sexual abuse by a male in childhood? Because my experience with the first one, gay man, it seems that the gay men that I have known and been acquainted with through the years, there's always been an absent father. In my very limited, I'm just talking about in my social circle, but I was just wondering, research-wise, what
Emotionally absent.
So Nicolosi, in his research, he's the one that founded reparative therapy and got everyone hated him for it. And the data from Your House has shown you cannot change orientations. People can make choices against what they and so he kind of made everyone mad. And Your House research was interesting. But his practice, all of his therapists, every single one, he said, I've never seen a gay man who didn't have father issues. And that could get into absent emotionally, completely absent father. But then I take a step back and go, do we all, to some extent? Like the impact of dad. Here's what's weird about our culture. There are studies, and you're not going to see them published publicly. They're out there, and they're about the role of the father. But we're going to offend a lot of people if we say this. And the fact is, as moms, you're important, but the dads probably matter more.
I agree with that.
It's scary though.
I
Makes
totally
me not want to
agree
have
with
kids.
that.
Oh wait, it's too late. The kids are always looking to the father, no matter where he is or what he's doing, as to who they should be or what they should follow, what they should worship. Mom can take the kids to church every Sunday. It's funny how they still look at dad, unless other intervention. And the two key people that I've seen over the years that have been the interveners of that, or three, was teachers, coaches, and youth pastors. That had that to have that kind of conversation that just cracked open a whole different self and purpose and direction. So absolutely yes, would say on the first one. The second one, the sexual abuse in women, overwhelmingly yes, except here's where we've actually really gotten it wrong. The church has said for a while, well, everyone who's gay has been sexually abused. And just a blanket statement. It's not true. What's happening now is a trend of, hey, it's popular and cool.
Yeah.
And so the amount of girls, though, who probably also have an absent father, but who go, I'm going to go try this because this is the cool thing to do. It's on the increase. Why? Culture. This is just bias. Oh my gosh, being bisexual is a hip thing to do, so let's do it. Talk to many of them, they have no clue what they're talking about, or they've had zero experience, they're just talking. And that's where when the line gets crossed to physical happening, now a different story is begun. So what I found, if they haven't had any physical acts, like with same-sex, there's a lot of hope, conversations, and them understanding the depth of who they are. If physical has happened, there's a rewiring in the brain and body that's harder to let go of. So here's kind of, actually, I have it also that story in the book, but there's this young woman who, she came in and she's like, I know I'm not lesbian, but I've been in this relationship and I don't know who I am. What she said was, or what she was expecting was for me to condemn her for this relationship. And I said, so how was the relationship? She goes, it was amazing. It's like, I asked a weird question. I said, how was the physical? She goes, it was the safest place I'd ever found. I was like, that's awesome. That's beautiful. So what's the problem? She goes, it's not God's design. I'm like, yeah. What do you want? It's like, I want to be able to want the other, but I don't know if I want the other. Why? Absent father and absent mother. Lots of abuse. What led to that? Well, I decide who's safe or not. It's weird to think that the same thing that can be beautiful in a committed relationship, sex, is the same thing that's harmed so many people. And sometimes the same person. It's good here, but there's harm here. How do you reconcile that? It's whoever I deem them safe. So you need to be able to delineate better what's safe and what's not. Well, for this young lady, she met this young girl and they became friends and they got physical and it was safe. Yeah. That was actually God's design in the first place. But did you take it too far? Yeah. Okay. Trying to walk her to a place of, so who do you want to be? Consciously choosing. And she's saying, I want to be who Christ wants me to be. Okay. Now we have a different story. Now we have a different next step. Versus, that's terrible, how dare you? She's on a journey, and I'm going to walk alongside her in this journey for a very brief season. She's going to continue on that journey without me.
So you're teaching her how to see the correct vision for God's purpose. And you're hoping that she puts that vision in front of her and walks toward it, like you said at the beginning, an hour or whatever ago, that we've got to have a vision and a purpose. So what you're doing with this young lady is showing her God's purpose for that safe place, right?
And the honest truth, you may not ever find marriage. It's also where we've kind of failed when it comes to this picture of marriage. Many single adults don't feel safe in a church because it's so marriage-centric and family-centric. And it's like, where do I fit? Single parent, even worse. Where do I fit? It's like, we need to do some reshuffling of some of this. You may never get married, okay? Doesn't fix anything. So be careful. That belief about marriage is really important. This is when you're planning that belief about marriage, though. Not at 11 plus. I would actually really literally say, by 11, your kids have that. They've watched it. They've gone to their friend's house and watched that crazy mess, and they've gone over here and watched that crazy mess, and they've maybe watched your crazy mess. By 10, 11, they have that in them, and they're working it out from there. So there's no such thing as the talk, because we would put it in the next category. It's the micro conversations, it's planting the seeds. Here are some of the things. What is a boyfriend, girlfriend? We do this with little kids. You got a 4-year-old, oh, is this your girlfriend? It's like, stop doing that. When can you have a boyfriend or girlfriend? Never. That's child play words anyway. When can you start dating? Well, my rule of thumb is senior in college. When you can pay the bill and actually know how to drive and have a car to drive and maybe potentially have a job lined up and manage the baby that's on the way. When I see a 16-year-old dating, what I tell the parents is you have a baby within 2 years or less or a wedding. Just, if you're dating, so the stats are literally this. If you start dating at 18, the pregnancy rate prior to the wedding is smaller and go backwards. You start dating at 17, 16, 15, and it's up to like 70, 80%. When you get down to 14, 13, they're asking all the time, when can I start dating? It's like, that's humorous. Can you spend time with people? Yeah. You need to have incredible boundaries. This has to be planted earlier, this ethos of what's our standard as a family and how are we going to walk alongside you to help you succeed? Because our goal is to help you have an amazing life and this be a good thing. Another one's more descriptive anatomy at this point. This is where you're talking processing what is masturbation. It's not some evil, horrible thing that's going to send you to hell. Yet I've had ministries in Georgia. There was a ministry that came and spoke at chapel, the school I was at, and I literally had a line of people afterwards going, "I'm leaving the ministry. I'm leaving college because based on what he said, I'm not a Christian, and I don't know if I can ever stop." Because they tied masturbation to their salvation. If you masturbate, you're not a Christian. If you look at pornography, you're not a Christian. It's like, okay, cool. So when you're perfect, just come back and talk to me because I need to find out what your secret sauce is. Versus, get it out of your operating system. Let's actually think about it, and you'll find change. Well, they weren't ready for that yet. For them, we got there later. But they were ready to leave school, leave their call to ministry, everything, because it was too often tied to your salvation, which is scary. Boundaries is critical with everyone. This is they're starting to learn some of those with men, with women, with doors, with when you're changing clothes at the like at Kohl's or something, and your son or daughter, are you done? Boundaries of what they do and don't do. It's all those things. This micro conversations like crazy. What is pornography? I strongly recommend having a book on your coffee table called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. Get on Amazon, it's a great book. And it's literally this sociologist talking through there are good pictures and bad pictures. And you've got a brain that actually has a thinking brain and a feeling brain. And you've got to make decisions. And really it's on you, and you walk through. I wouldn't recommend the youngest one. There's a younger version. I actually like the older one a little better. That's really a powerful book. When that's Blaze. When he was 5 or 6, we were in a house with a park across the street. One day I went outside and he was standing there and he was like, "Blaze, what's up?" And he goes, "Dad, my feeling brain says I should go across the street to the park, but my thinking brain tells me I'll get in trouble." He just summed it all up right there. Wow, we don't get it, you do. That's awesome. But pornography is always going to be there, and it's going to be enticing. Satan lives in the darkness, and Satan lives in secrecy. So if there is that, it will probably continue. Confession is powerful. It does not mean you stand up here and confess. I don't believe that you have to do that. It's finding those safe people. There will be people that will abuse data from you. You share things, they will take advantage of that. They can hurt you more. But we need to be able to say, hey, I've got this issue, and help me be accountable, and help me, just by you knowing, I'm actually more likely to again, make conscious choices, which is really important. So it's the same for at this age. Sexual identity. This is when our kids are asking questions about gender. Most look down and go, oh, penis, and they're done. They're not really processing a lot of data to choose male or female. But they are on further sexual identity pieces. When they're a little more talented over here, but the culture says this is male or female. And they start realizing it's a little more nuanced. You need to help them process that and think through that. That just because you like pink doesn't mean a boy likes pink, there's something wrong. Yet that's kind of what happens. Dignity and modesty. So we are again planting those seeds. What does that mean? I like the word dignity. Why do we cover up? It's not out of prudishness, it's out of dignity. And then when we uncover in marriage is out of a safety of that and that experience that God created. But it's not out of prudishness. I like that word dignity. This is where you're actually preparing them to understand the power of abuse and trauma. The things that can happen to them, the things that could happen to them, the things that are the dangers that are out there. This isn't a world where God heal all the people that are sick and help fix every boo-boo. They're starting to kind of go, yeah, this has happened, and this person's in jail, and this person's there. And,
Could you maybe speak about back on the modesty issue?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, and I raised 2 girls, and there are other young moms in the room raising girls right now. It's crazy when you go to shop for your little girl and you can't find suitable clothing because, there's an industry out there that's trying to sexualize children. What do we do?
I don't know. Part of it is helping, it's weird to say this, but you're helping them make these decisions, but you're making it very overt about where those boundaries are. Because you're not just choosing clothes, you're creating a way of thinking and feeling about themselves. The industry is aiming at everything from makeup to just top down, every little thing. You basically, if you're female, you're in trouble. Your self-esteem should be in the crapper based on the industry. It's horrible. It's all a setup. It's really, what kind of stuff do you allow in? What kind of things do you allow? Is your teenager reading Teen Vogue? Good luck with that. As they have to filter, then who am I in relation to this? Where's the boundary of what I do have a say as to what they consume? Anything from Hannah Montana, which might seem harmless, it's not. It's creating a culture of kind of this almost little idol. The world revolves around me. One of my pet peeves, I believed this for a while with Miley experiment number 3, of being a little girl. I've never called her my princess. I'm very careful not to use that word because, and my wife thinks I'm crazy on this, but I've seen that taken too far with a lot of the sexual abuse victims I worked with, where they were daddy's little princess, coddled in a way that led to trust that was they were taken advantage of because of that trust. So I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to let her be my princess. She's a punk. She is. But and she's fierce in her will and her opinion and her vocabulary and how to channel that. And then each kid literally is that, an experiment of channeling that personality into the best version of themselves. So her then making decisions about covering and how she does that, that's going to be us navigating with her. The industry is out to get
Can
girls.
you not navigate by saying you're not going to wear that?
Yes.
We are still the parent.
Just like the family that the son is now transitioned to being a daughter. Last I checked, he didn't have a job, and that now pink room with the Barbies and everything else was purchased by the parents. You are facilitating, I literally would say, the child abuse. If you look at where the family's at, they would honestly say, I feel like I'm doing the best I can. Because they're in a place of absolute crisis, and they're looking around them for someone to lead. And the experts are saying, They are. We've got to make sure that they are safe and that they're coddled and that they're transitioning and on the right hormones, and you've got to give them what they want. And our culture is in an absolute mess here. And so I don't think by just going, the Bible says, boom, this helps us. So be careful with that. Practically, this gets messy. Again, we watch that, the TV show or the Netflix show, Raising Koi. It's like a kid in Colorado, a little boy, I think, traditionally a girl, or vice versa. The parents are honestly and earnestly hurting for their child, and they don't know what to do, and they're listening to the experts. There's not a lack of love. But yeah.
Those same, or some experts are saying now that you need to ask permission from your baby to change their diaper. First of all, I don't even know how you
Good
do
luck.
that. How do you do that?
Well, and then the stars who have all this wonderful education out there too, who are saying, we're going to let our child decide. And it's like, yeah, look down in between their legs, it was decided. There's 0.02% where it's intersex, that's a different story. And what they found with that is it doesn't matter what they decide, they're wrong. It's a really difficult nightmare of whoever the parents decide when they're born, as they grow up, they tend to, well, I should have been the other. We're all trying to figure ourselves out, who we are, and this makes it, but it's a small percentage. But what's the percentage of homosexual men and women in America?
It's lower than the public, I think.
So what's your guess as to a number?
5%.
30%? 5%?
I think I don't know. I've heard it was really incredibly low. Like, yeah.
But the media has made it seem like it's 75%.
Correct. But here's, let me make a connection.
You just say
1%. Yes, sir.
homosexuals in America.
Yeah. The numbers are, when the numbers grow, it's when you put in all the people who are either questioning or kind of in that, I'm sexually attractive, I don't know who I am. It gets to maybe at the max 3 or 4%. It's never been whatever all the numbers we see out there. No, but here, let's think of this connection. We might be talking about this tomorrow, but the divorce rate. You know people that are divorced, probably. Most everyone does. So we just assumed it's 50% divorce rate because that's what the media says, what many have said. Shanti Feldon a couple years ago said, she's a researcher, Christian researcher, and she said, where is this from? And she starts looking, can't find where it's from. It was made up a decade or two ago. And she's like, what is the actual truth? At the highest it's ever been was at maybe 33%. The majority of marriages are actually intact. Second marriages are a little higher, but it's not as dire as it's been made to be. Like if your second marriage, then it's 75 or 80%, like some have said. No, it's not true. But we've believed it. Why? Because most all of us know someone who's divorced or multiple divorced. So we believe because of our experience. That's the bad data. Your experience is bad data. The divorce rate is not that bad. And there's a lot more hope for those getting married to stay married. And the difference was, when you get married, if you do have a problem, that most couples, even with very little intervention, within 5 years, that it's worked itself out and they're in a better place. Because in 5 years, there's a lot of transition of life stages and things that happen. But then there's key factors that if these are involved, the divorce rate plummets into the teens. So you don't live together before marriage. That one right there bumps it up. If you live together before marriage. College education. And there's a whole list of things of church involvement that decrease as well. And so what was it? College education. What's the third one?
Have a job?
No, actually the third one out. Just one blank on the other one. Well, so the other side of that is the church attendance decreases, read the Bible regularly, and prayer. Oh yeah, the age they got married.
Oh yeah.
Good job. The divorce rate's higher if you get married between 20 to 24. It's less if 25 and up. Just think about that. Brain development.
It's when your brain's developed.
But it's not like it's so worse, you're now in the 89 percentile of going to get divorced if you get married in your 20s, early 20s, than if you get married in the late 20s. It's brain development. Or it's knowing what you want to do, or who you are. And we've kind of delayed that.
And do you go into detail in your book about these different things and these different age groups of how do you approach the boundaries talk with this between 6 and 10-year-old? Our girls fit right in this range, and so like, do you say okay? And these, like you said, are micro conversations, so it's not going to be like a lengthy, whatever. But do you like say here are some tips on how to even bring this up, and what do you go into that a little bit more?
A little bit, but not enough. Okay. So that's my next project, if you will, is to do the age ones. And then that's part of my goal with the membership site is to developing video content, short videos, is teaching some of these things, examples of this. Still trying to convince my son to be on a podcast, to start working on that. The goal is to start teaching and training and building more. We need to do this well, but
Can
how?
you do that next week?
Sure, I'll be back next week.
He'll do it for money.
Well, it's a paid gig, so once there's money. But so not a lot, but it addresses them kind of on more of a 30,000 foot view. Because the purpose of this really is, it's less on how to have the conversations on what do I believe as a parent first. Once that's in place, the next step then is, then how do I engage? The last part of the book kind of talks a little more about that, especially the hot topics.
Because I tell you what, it is super challenging. We're older parents having younger kids, and I mean, we go to birthday parties, and I'm like, what? I told him, like, we are more and more in the minority with the things that we believe and the things how we're raising the kids. We've been jokingly by our friends called Amish because we don't have certain things, or whatever, but in a way, it does for conversation, but other than that, it's like, man, we have to like come together and remain, strong on how we do this, because if not, we'll cave in because other parents don't believe that. And so approaching these from this perspective and being proactive with it, I know it's not the norm.
Well, and using what's around us. So one example, I took all 3 of our kids to see Ready Player One. So I don't know if you've seen it. Great movie, but there's a scene where his physical self's here, and he's wearing basically the virtual reality, and he's living an avatar because the world is so bad that they just literally live kind of on another plane for that world anyway. So he's met this girl, they meet in the virtual world, and she's dressed in this just gorgeous, sleek, red dress, and I look over at my oldest, and look at Blaze, and then Miley's had all 3 take note, and then ask after her. So Alex, I was like, did you notice? He's like, didn't want to say a word. Blaze, he's like, kind of just more like, still probably going, penis, he's just lolling there. Miley was like, wasn't that a pretty dress? They're all in different places, and you don't know unless you ask. Then we were walking out of the movie theater another time, and there was this girl that was wearing something she shouldn't. She was, I don't know what size the breasts are, but go to the largest ones you've ever seen and go a few more. Like, she was huge, and her neckline was literally probably this far, and she was a teenager. And so after we left, I asked all 3 of them, did you notice her? And I said, so what's her story? She has a story. She's not a thing. She has a story. What's her story? What's her relationship with her mom, her dad? We just kind of walked through. And yes, we all noticed. But it's a point of conversation. Every movie, everything, every commercial, how do you process? Why is there a Victoria's Secret commercial on? It's like, exactly. If you walk by Victoria's Secret, I'm not really sure who they're advertising to. When you have a 45-foot boob in the window. Like, it's not to women. It's just weird advertising. Using all that as part of those conversations. Using stories around you, friends, and what they're doing or how they're living. And you're planting those seeds of this is how we choose to live, and you're going to have to choose yours. I remember telling him at probably 10 or 11 even, you're your own man. It terrifies me to death, but you are your own person. And that we can have rules here, but when you go out, manage that device and that device. Filters are ridiculous in some sense because, I mean, we can filter it here, but the kid just switches to the Wi-Fi on the neighbors and they're free reign. Doesn't really, it's a heart. That's really the purpose of this, is you gotta get to the heart, their heart, as to why not? Why not just indulge in everything? And then this last section, this is the puberty, dating, gender, and sexuality. This is where it's playing out and getting much more real as they build relationships. So, social media and technology. One of the struggles that I had at one point was, I remember Alex walked into youth group, and they're all playing everyone has a cell phone, and they're all playing games. And he's clueless, because he's never even touched one at that point. And so he felt like a million miles outside of here. So I'm like, okay, through conversations, we let him have a phone, he got some of those games, he saw how dumb they are, and then he asked me if he could get a refund on those games. I'm like, that's not the way it works. And everybody's gone. And you move on to process, are these conversations that I really want to have? Do I want to be in that in-group? Who do I want to be? That's the hard part of really kind of where he's at now. Of navigating. Does he need social media? No one needs it. It's a tool. It's about managing it. Some of us probably need a good long seminar on how to manage it in terms of how our use or overuse or reliance, or we're always depressed because we're watching other people and their lives. And this thing gets into TV and movies and everything else that we consume. More is being consumed now on YouTube. That is TV today to most kids. It's not live TV like we had, when I grew up we had one channel, Chili, and when they added a second one there was fighting in the house. I mean, it was a different culture than if you have any kind of dish or anything. You have 400 channels. Netflix and other stuff. Stewardship in your child's heart. This is what this is all about. This is really scary because it's something you can't control. That they're their own person already. Even though I've told my children for years that they have no free will. It's not true. I know that. There's a time you really are. You're like, no, you're doing this. And there's also a time you're like, you're going to have to make that decision. But what I see in our culture right now is parents, we need to be way more engaged on some of that, not hands off, as they're processing the world and making new decisions. You've got to dive deep into this one. Homosexuality and same-sex attraction. It is not a sin to be attracted to the same sex. You hear that statement? Think of the word attraction. Is it a sin, married men in this room, to be attracted to another woman? Say no, it's not a sin. You noticed. It's the dodo bird that doesn't, who fakes and acts like he didn't notice, that actually later takes her in and is probably doing something he shouldn't in his head. So we lie to ourselves that Satan gets a hold. Versus, no, I did notice and I moved on. Stewardship. It's teaching them skills to realize, no, I'm going to actually notice people and I'm going to feel things. I'm going to be attracted. It's not data that I need to rely on, which is really critical. So no matter what your attractions are, is important. Homosexuality, if you just look at the biological impact on the body, it's a really sad place we're in. The amount of men who've had to have their whole rear ends amputated because of anal sex. That the anus is not meant for intercourse. Yet my human sexuality textbook and everything else is saying, hey, try this new thing. One of the things I subscribe to is I get articles every day on sexual topics in the media, and it's the push right now is just anal sex, anal sex, anal sex, anal sex, everything. But if you read them, they're hilarious because it's like, well, you got to make sure you're really clean, basically give yourself an enema, and you have to do all these things, and the chance of disease is this, and well, we've turned what's supposed to be relationship into a drug. No. And no self-respect doctor, I would say, would endorse anal sex, yet that's the push in our culture. Now, there's some other ones that get a little more complicated. As a couple, should you bring in, is it okay to bring in toys or other kind of things? It's like everyone's got their own little, there's nothing I can point to in Scripture and say, that says you can't, thou shalt not use feathers, or whatever. But when I can, homosexuality is. Now, there's 7 passages in the Scripture about homosexuality. I never touch those. Don't even have them ready for us to talk about here, because it is hands down clear that that is not God's original design. A book a few years ago came out. It's called God and the Gay Christian, and it became the defining, like the conversations are over, because this defines it, that it's okay to be gay and a Christian and to marry and all these things, driven by a Harvard kid. Every single premise he started from was false. Yet, I'd say every premise he started from, I've heard of the church. Like one of them was, well, since God made an Adam for every Eve, if I'm gay, then he made an Adam for every, a guy for me, kind of thing. It's like, the thing is, we've said that in church. There's someone out there for you. I don't know that. You may be single the rest of your life. We need to be careful when we tell in the church that it's not biblical. Because that's actually, if you look at his book, it's literally a list of all the things. So right after it came out, or the day it came out, Stan Jones and others from Wheaton and other schools had a nice response. You can download it on Amazon for I think $1. And it's just a walkthrough of every single one of their arguments. And here's the reason why those aren't true. So well done. We're in a mess. Is oral sex okay? It used to not be okay. Now it seems to be okay all the time, anywhere. Is there anyone in Scripture that says? What about contraception? Because before the 60s, it was seen as a bad thing. Protestants grabbed right onto it. Catholics are now starting to, but they've taken a slower route to that. Is that good? Is it bad? That's a lot of topics to... So my human sexuality class, I literally walked through a theology of homosexuality, a theology of contraception, a theology of masturbation, a theology of singleness. So your belief about these is that foundation that you then grow this from. TV and movies kind of talked about how you, I would say use these as tools if you enjoy these. I love movies, and so it's been a fun tool. Music is another big one. Lyrics and music. Influences and idols. What do you worship? The music, like some music star, poster, or sports star, or movie star. What does that mean? What does that look like? I think you can think they're pretty cool, but I think you can turn into worship really quick. Being able to process that out loud. Here's some old ones. Titanic is a great movie of, well, a very vulnerable girl who gets taken advantage of, a really creepy guy who dies in the end. Yay! Within 2 days, had sex with her a couple times. It's funny because it's like the biggest romantic comedy. Oh my gosh, it's creepy. Kelly is decided that she's like, I'm gonna die never having seen that movie. She never wants to see that movie. Conquering of, really? So who we are when it comes to that really matters, and how we use these tools. So this is actually what I created, FamilyLaunchAcademy.com. It's my main purpose for this, I'm using this even more in Oregon. So I've got clients counseling, and I've got coaching, which is more expensive. This is the cheaper way to dive into learning, teaching. It's going to be monthly Q&As, and then actually be able to ask questions, and here's what's actually happening in my home right now. What I do right now in counseling, I sit a lot of time with parents, and then they go, can you talk to my kid? And I'm like, I'd rather help you with how to help your kid. But it's probably about half and half right now. With the other half, I'm having to go talk to the kid. Had one the other day, earlier this year. I went to Portland and I'm in their house. And when the kid realized that that's why I was there, he took off and ran away for 2 days. It was terrible.
How old was he?
About 12. But he had perpetrated on a neighbor girl. So that's been what was wild about the family is the husband had been kicked out. And so he was living in a trailer, and by the time I pulled out of that family, their marriage was back together and they had kids, and there were 3 sons that were learning to deal with some of this stuff, teach this. But they were a nice little homeschool family that had pulled themselves away from the world and not prepared them. Not had these conversations, and their kid did something to another kid, and it's like, I would say very innocently so, but not okay. If you're just a little older, you probably need jail. It's that kind of thing. So I've got a number of those right now, where I've got teenage boys who have crossed a line. I hate that. So my preference is for the parents to prevent some of that, and then to be able to build. Here's what I believe, and here's how you then teach it to my kids. Here's how to lead. Because you're the leader, whether you're doing it intentionally or not. They're following you for cues as to what to do, who to be. What does it mean to be a man, woman, husband, wife, all those hats and roles, work ethic. So that's important. Well, flies. I'm already at noon, which is what, 10 o'clock my time. Started early this morning. I'm not sure what time it is right now. Any other questions before we wrap up? Anything that's pressing on your mind that you want to throw out there for us to kind of think about? And then I can...
Good. One thing to just clarify.
Yes, sir.
If a young person, adolescent teen, says that they're choosing an alternative lifestyle, being gay, lesbian, are they choosing a much harder life?
Yes.
What makes it
the culture is saying, and even some of the data is saying, that if you force them to not do that, that's the worst lifestyle. You give them the best option. That option means higher incidence of suicidality, incredible disease risks. Is my goal just for them to find someone to love and to be loved? I would say no, it's not. My goal is that they be broken for, in their heart, and that it's not happiness. If the goal is happiness, sure, whatever makes you happy. Holiness, that's a different story. That's where even marriage becomes, why do I get married? It's not about being happy. It's who I marry really shapes me. And if I marry, and I say this a lot, you didn't marry very well. Don't say it to the person, but some people don't marry very well. Like it's rough life. I usually say it to guys who their wives won't let them have motorcycles, but it's who you marry is, like, it's sad to me to hear these guys are like, I gotta go ask my wife. I'm like, no, you have the honor of respecting your wife. There's perspective too. You don't ask for permission. You love your wife, and it's out of honor and respect. It's different. So yes, I think it's a different, more difficult path. The more difficult thing to do is to help walk them carefully the next step and the next step and the next step. As in, think about it this way. If my goal is to make them straight, I will probably fail. If my goal is to make them holy, then I've got someone like, I forgot his name now. He's one of Preston Springle's friends. I have that strong, who would say they're a gay, celibate Christian. So I know who I am seems to be bent this way, but I'm choosing to submit that. What I would say for all of us, we all have that same part of our story, it's just maybe a different piece. That I've had that taste of alcohol and I have to submit that. I've had that taste of, and I have to It's that drug of choice. When you think of sexuality, in some sense, sure, have someone different all the time. If there's no consequences, have at it. Well, there are. So, homosexuality and transgender, choosing that path becomes very difficult. Now, talk to some of your neighbors who might be gay or lesbian and married, and what you're actually going to find is there are a lot of really happy people. They're an anomaly. Statistically, they're like very, 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 very few that are actually committed to each other. Because among heterosexuals, the infidelity rate is 50-60%. Among gay couples, it's 90 to 95%. Why? When you center everything around sex, what do you expect? Versus commitment. We want them to have a good life that's way bigger than just experiences or highs. So. Well, thank you guys very much for coming, and it's been an honor. I've got a book and stuff out there. If you go to that website, there's also that, if for anyone that's interested, or I'm here to talk if you want to talk as well. So thanks for having me. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.